Chapter 15-14. Brother Mukin. The woman's face was pale. She looked at Chu Mukin's bleeding palm worriedly. You're injured. Leave now. Chu Mukin lost his patience and roared. Mo Qingfeng was no longer the timid Mo Qingfeng from before. If she stayed here, she would really kill her. You want to leave? It's not that easy. Mo Qingfeng's figure flashed and stood in front of the woman in red. Her eyes were cold as if she just came out of hell. Since you're here to die, don't think about leaving alive. Mo Qingfeng's cold voice sounded. She didn't need to move at all. She was close to the woman in red in the blink of an eye. The woman in red wasn't stupid. She quickly dodged and threw herself into Chu Mukin's arms. She said pitifully, Brother Mukin, this woman is so scary. Mo Qingfeng, you can't kill her. Chu Mukin looked at Mo Qingfeng coldly. If you kill her, the people of Tanchuan country won't let you go. I won't kill her, but I won't let myself go. If you want to kill her, you have to kill me first. Chu Mukin looked at Mo Qingfeng with burning eyes. His words touched the woman in red, but angered Mo Qingfeng. Chu Mukin, don't test my patience. Mo Qingfeng looked at Chu Mukin coldly. Qi slowly gathered in her palm. Brother Mukin, don't be merciful to this woman. She killed my 6 white flowers. You have to avenge them. The woman in red hugged Chu Mukin's waist tightly. With him, she felt very safe. She believed that Brother Mukin would protect her with his life. Since you're so affectionate, I'll fulfill your wish and let you die together. Mo Qingfeng flew up and hit Chu Mukin with her palm. Shock flashed through Chu Mukin's eyes. She really made a move, and every move was vicious and merciless. The wind from her palms hit the ground, and the ground cracked. The earth shook, and the rocks on the edge of the cliff were smashed and rolled down. He held the woman in red and turned around to avoid Mo Qingfeng's attack. He didn't want to hurt her, so he just dodged and didn't make a move. The woman in red in his arms looked at Mo Qingfeng coldly. Chu Mukin didn't make a move because he didn't want to hurt her. Thinking of this, the woman in red's eyes became even more gloomy. She wanted to leave Chu Mukin's embrace and take her life, but when she thought of how the 6 flowers had died at her hands, how could she take her life? Roar! Suddenly, a clear and cold cry came from the sky. A huge bird flew over, and on the back of the bird, Nailan Jinyug stood there like a ghost, looking down proudly. His arrival made Mo Qingfeng stop. Mo Qingfeng frowned. Nailan Jinyu. 8th Wangye, you won't even let go of a woman. You are so cold-blooded. Nailan Jinyu's perfect thin lips curled up slightly as he said to Chu Mukin in an arrogant tone. Chu Mukin frowned. Nailan Jinyu. But the owner of Qinglu. Facing Nailan Jinyu's arrogant aura, Chu Mukin felt displeased. His aura was too similar to Du Gazinen's. He looked at Mo Qingfeng deeply and saw that her eyes were fixed on Nailan Jinyu. The murderous aura in her eyes also faded. Seeing her like this, Chu Mukin was even more displeased. I am disciplining my woman. It has nothing to do with an outsider like you. Chu Mukin said coldly. A touch of arrogance appeared in his deep and cold eyes. I have no interest in your disciplining of your woman, but I am interested in your provoking of my master. Nailan Jinyu's lips curled into a faint smile. The sunlight shone on his handsome face, which was as white as jade. How devastatingly beautiful was he! Even the princess of Tanchuan Kingdom, who was in Chu Mu Chen's arms, was shocked by his beauty. Mo Qingfeng frowned even deeper. Damn it, why did Nailan Jinyu's arrogant aura resemble Du Gazinen's so much? Mo Qingfeng's body flashed and stood firmly beside him. Nailan Jinyu flipped the hair in front of his chest and smiled elegantly at Mo Qingfeng. His voice changed from arrogance to gentleness. Miss M.O., I appeared in time, didn't I? M.O. Ching-Fong gritted her teeth. In time to stop me from killing them. If I didn't stop you in time, after killing them, the consequences would be very serious. Nalan Jinyu said with a chuckle. Then he glanced at Chu Mukin and said softly, the one in his arms is the princess from Tan Chuan Kingdom. The king of Tan Chuan Kingdom and the other princes dote on her very much. If you want to kill her, you can do it secretly. Don't do it openly. Then tell me, how should I do it secretly? If you really want them to die, you can leave it to me. Nalan Jinyu smiled seductively. He wasn't good at anything but killing people secretly. Mo Ching-Fong pursed her lips and looked coldly at Chu Mukin below. Although she really wanted Chu Mukin and that woman to die, she didn't want to kill them through Nalan Jinyu. She said to Nalan Jinyu, I'll spare them this time. If there's a next time, I'll kill them with my own hands. Then, should we go back now? If we don't go back, do we stay here and continue to kill them or wait for them to come and kill me? Mo Ching-Fong glared at him and said angrily. Okay, let's go back. Nalan Jinyu patted the big bird's neck. Xiang Yao, let's go back. Seeing the two figures gradually disappear into the sky, the woman in red looked at Chu Mukin unwillingly. Brother Mukin, you let them go just like that? That woman is the murderer of 6 flowers. Chu Mukin glanced at the headless bodies on the ground and said, she's my princess. The woman in red's expression changed slightly. But she killed 6 flowers. Chu Mukin raised his eyebrows and looked at the woman in red. Princess Lingyi, why are you here? Du Wenjun said that you had arrived at Mount Danxia. I heard that there were demonic beasts on this mountain. I was very worried, so I brought 6 flowers here. When I saw a figure on the top of the mountain, I thought it was you, so I came here. Who knew that woman said that we were wild women transformed from beasts? She killed 6 flowers and wanted to kill me. Lingyi grabbed Chu Mukin's hand. Her face was slightly pale and there was a trace of fear in her beautiful eyes. That woman is so powerful. Then, Lingyi lowered her head. Her beautiful face instantly became cold and twisted. Mo Ching-Fong, one day I'll kill you with my own hands. She came from Tan Chuan country to Chu Qian country because she wanted to be with Chu Mu Qin, who she had admired for a long time. But when she arrived at Chu Qian country, she found out that Chu Mu Qin had already married, and his princess consort was actually Mo Ching-Fong. She heard a little about the rumors about Mo Ching-Fong. How could such an ugly woman be qualified to be the 8th princess's princess? Last night, she accidentally heard the conversation between Du Wenjun and Bai Shuling. Only then did she know that Mo Ching-Fong not only became beautiful but also very powerful. What made her even more angry was that Chu Mukin always wanted to see her. These days, he asked Du Wenjun to find her at Kuqing Tower every day. Thinking that Chu Mukin was completely focused on Mo Ching-Fong, Lingyi was jealous and angry. When she heard that Chu Mukin came to Mount Danxia, she came all the way here with her subordinates. But she didn't expect that Chu Mukin was here to have a rendezvous with Mo Ching-Fong. She heard everything they said at the top of Mount Danxia. Seeing Chu Mukin looking at Mo Ching-Fong affectionately, her hatred for Mo Ching-Fong deepened. She hated her so much that she wanted to kill her. She thought that today was the best chance to kill Mo Ching-Fong, but she didn't expect that she would fail and lose 6 flowers' life. Chu Mukin frowned slightly and looked at Lingyi with a heavy expression. He didn't believe her words but didn't say anything. He walked to the edge of the cliff. Thinking of Mo Ching-Fong's noble and awe-inspiring face and the cold and disgust in her eyes when she looked at him, anger burned in his heart. Thinking of Duge Xinin and Nalan Jinyu, he suddenly felt that he and Mo Ching-Fong were over. She wouldn't return to the 8th Wangfu. He stood there motionless. The wind blew his clothes and his lips were tightly pursed. His indifferent handsome face was a little pale, as if his soul had been pulled out of his body. His whole body was dim. Brother Mukin. Ling Yi also felt his sadness. Thinking that it was Mo Qingfeng who made him unhappy, she bit her lip. Her heart was filled with hatred and anger towards Mo Qingfeng. She walked over and stood beside Chu Mukin. She raised her head and looked at him faintly. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of white mist. It was indescribably pitiful. She also said softly, "Brother Mukin, are you okay?" Her voice was gentle and soft, and it even trembled slightly. It made people's hearts tighten, but Chu Mukin acted as if he didn't hear it. He still stood there, looking ahead with a gloomy and indifferent gaze. An unfathomable expression appeared on his handsome face. Ling didn't know what he was thinking at all. The white mist floating on the endless mountain peaks was getting thicker and thicker, like the white clouds in the sky. But at this time, Chu Mukin's heart was getting more and more empty, and his expression was more and more dignified. "Big brother Mu Qin, say something," Ling Yi said anxiously. Her voice couldn't help but increase a little. She looked down and saw that his palm was still bleeding. She wanted to help him treat the wound. Who knew that when she touched his sleeve, his whole body stiffened as if he had been electrocuted. He suddenly moved his arm away. Ling also lowered her head and stared blankly at her raised hand. Her heart was in extreme pain and she felt extremely wronged. Her beautiful eyes were quickly filled with tears, but her delicate little face was twisted viciously. It was that damned woman, Mo Qingfeng, who hurt her beloved brother Mu Qin. She would definitely not let her off. Nailan Jinyu drove Xiang Yao from the top of Danxia Mountain to Kuqing Tower. The speed was not fast. Mo Qingfeng, who was sitting on Xiang Yao's back, could enjoy the surrounding scenery. Something seems to be happening below. On a mountain path near the city street, a group of people were chasing something. When they got closer, it turned out that a group of people were chasing a young woman in a red wedding dress. The young woman lifted her skirt and stumbled as she ran. Suddenly, a young man rushed forward, grabbed her skirt and pulled her back. The young woman fell heavily to the ground. At this time, the group of people chasing her quickly surrounded her, blocking off all avenues of escape. The woman fell and her jewelry fell to the ground. Her neatly combed hair was also messed up. She quickly stood up and shouted at the man who had just grabbed her, "I won't marry. I won't marry even if I die. Kill me if you can." Chapter 15:15. Nailan Jinyu and Mo Qingfeng slowly moved forward and stopped above their heads. Nailan Jinyu used an invisibility technique so the people on the ground didn't notice them. Mo Qingfeng looked at the woman in the wedding dress with interest. Her gaze was strong, determined and angry as she looked at the people surrounding her. There was no trace of fear on her face. The woman's facial features were exquisite, but unfortunately, there were 2 finger-thick scars on the right side of her face. It seemed like she was cut by a knife. Perhaps she didn't treat the wound well at that time. The scars stuck on her face were like 2 earthworms. "You ugly freak, do you think I don't dare to kill you? I worked so hard to raise you and finally found a man to marry you. You still dare to run away from the marriage? You really have guts." The man shouted and grabbed her arm tightly. "Now go back and perform the wedding ceremony with young Master Meng Chen. If you miss the auspicious time, you can wait to enter 100 Blossom Courtyard." "I won't marry. I don't want to marry that fool." The woman struggled desperately and shouted at the top of her lungs. Slap! The man grabbed the woman's collar and fiercely slapped her. His face was ferocious. With your face, you should be happy if Master O doesn't dislike you. You still dislike young Master O Chun for being a fool. The man's slap almost took the woman's life. The corner of her lips was broken and there was a heavy taste of blood in her mouth. She tried hard not to faint and looked at the man and said word by word, "Even if you beat me today, I won't marry O Chun. I say, Yen Xia, just listen to your big brother and marry into the O manor. Although young Master Ming Chun is like a child, at least you can enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and rank after marrying him." A plainly dressed middle-aged man stepped forward and earnestly persuaded the woman. The woman didn't agree and sneered. "Enjoy glory and wealth? Do you think I can enjoy glory and wealth after marrying? I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than go to the O Manor to enjoy glory and wealth." The O Manor had a big business. O Chun was usually mocked by other concubines and young masters. After she married, could she enjoy glory and wealth? Her face was already like this. Not to mention that she had to endure all the supercilious looks. If she married into the O Manor, she would be mocked by those concubines. Wasn't this asking for trouble? If you want to spend the rest of your life alone, I won't stop you. You can marry into the European Union and let them divorce you. But today, you must go back and perform the wedding ceremony. The man who grabbed the woman said sternly, "You're not Mo Qingfeng. You won't become beautiful one day. She is indeed not Mo Qingfeng, but she will become beautiful one day." At this moment, a cold voice sounded. Everyone turned around and looked at the source of the voice. They saw Mo Qingfeng slowly walking over. She was dressed in green and looked noble and awe-inspiring. Everyone who saw her was stunned. What a beautiful fairy! Mo Qingfeng walked over step by step under everyone's surprised and amazed gazes. As she approached, everyone could feel a strong sense of oppression, so oppressive that it made it hard for them to breathe. They even timidly made way for her, allowing her to arrive in front of the red-clothed woman and the burly man without any obstructions. Mo Qingfeng stood still and looked at the woman in red with a smile. "What's your name?" "Fu Yanxia." The woman in red quickly recovered from her shock and answered immediately. Mo Qingfeng smiled gently. "I want you." Her smile instantly made the sun lose its color. It was like 100 flowers blooming together. The hearts of the men present sped up and their ears turned red. What a beautiful woman! Fu Yanxia's eyes widened. She looked at Mo Qingfeng in shock. She couldn't believe what she heard. She said she wanted her. Was this a fairy sent by the heavens? Fu Yanxia was extremely excited. Her heart was beating faster than any of the men present. In order to make sure that she wasn't dreaming, she bit her tongue. It hurt. It wasn't a dream. A fairy really came down to save her. Fu Yanxia looked at Mo Qingfeng in surprise. "I'll go with you." As long as she didn't marry O Yuchen, she would do anything. You, who are you?" The man who grabbed Fu Yanxia finally regained his senses. He used his sleeve to rudely wipe the saliva that flowed to the side of his mouth. He deliberately put on a fierce look at Mo Qingfeng, but his voice was trembling so much that it made people want to laugh. "You don't need to know who I am. I want her." Mo Qingfeng looked at Fu Yanxia. Her faint voice had a trace of dignity and coldness that made people unable to refuse. "She will be a member of the O Manor. If you want her, you have to get Master O's permission." The man tried to calm himself down. He was a dignified man. He couldn't show weakness in front of a woman. He might as well bring out Master O. The O family was so prestigious in the capital. He didn't believe that this woman wasn't afraid. "I'm not a member of the O Manor." "Let go." Fu Yanxia shook off the man's hand and walked to Mo Qingfeng's side. She tightly grabbed her sleeve and looked anxious. Even if I go to hell, I won't marry into the O Manor. Fairy, please take me with you. No matter where you go, I'll follow you. You damn girl. The man's eyes became even more ferocious. He looked like he wanted to eat Fu Yanxia. He cursed and wanted to grab her. Suddenly, Mo Qingfeng stretched out her arm and hit the man's chest. The man felt pain in his chest and took a few steps back. Mo Qingfeng saw that they were wearing rough clothes and didn't know martial arts. So when she hit the man, she only used half of her strength to give him a warning. She didn't want to kill anyone. The man clutched his chest. His ferocious appearance changed as he looked at Mo Qingfeng in shock. When the palm hit his chest, he felt a burst of pain. When he stood firm, the pain disappeared. He only felt a wave of heat circulating inside. If the other party wanted to kill him, it would be easy, but she didn't. She was merciful. Fu Yanxia and the people present were worried that Mo Qingfeng would hurt the man. But when they saw that he stood firm and didn't seem to be injured, they all sighed in relief. I want her. From this moment on, she is mine. If you dare to touch my people, don't blame me for not being polite. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Big brother, take them back. No matter what, I won't marry O Guichen. You can return the betrothal money to the O Manor. They won't trouble you. Just let me go. I really don't want to marry. Fu Yanxia tried to persuade the man. You make it sound so good. When the man heard this, he returned to his previous ferocious look. But when he met Mo Qingfeng's cold eyes, he didn't dare to shout so loudly. He accepted the O Manor's money to let Fu Yanxia marry that fool. Now that Fu Yanxia said she didn't want to marry, where could he get the money to pay them back? Besides, would the O Manor forgive him if they knew she ran away? Chapter 15-16. Besides, would the O Manor forgive her if they knew she ran away? An ugly girl who couldn't be any poorer actually dared to run away in front of so many people. Wasn't this shaming the O Manor? Yanxia, you have to marry even if you don't want to. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for the village. We provoked the O Manor today, will they let us go? A middle-aged woman dressed in coarse clothes walked out and said worriedly. Her skin was rough and dark due to years of hard work, and there were small bumps on her face. Mo Qingfeng glanced at them. Other than the man who was slapped by her, everyone else had rough and dark skin. They were dressed in coarse clothes and looked no different from beggars on the streets. However, they all had a very healthy and strong aura. Mo Qingfeng narrowed her eyes. Her beautiful face flashed with a hint of contemplation. She was planning something in her heart. Fu Yanxia bit her lips. Although the lives of the villagers were important, she couldn't just give in and marry into the O Manor. She made up her mind and tightened her grip on Mo Qingfeng's sleeve. She looked at the woman and said firmly, "Seventh sister-in-law, I want to leave with this fairy. Just pretend that I'm dead. If the O Manor asks, just say that I jumped off the cliff to commit suicide. I've raised you for nothing." The man roared. He was so angry at Fu Yanxia's words that he gritted his teeth. However, Mo Qingfeng was protecting her so he couldn't do anything. Big brother, I'm sorry. Fu Yanxia lowered her head. Her big brother had no choice but to marry her into the O Manor. However, she really didn't want to marry O Guchuan. O Guchuan was an idiot. He was always bullied by the concubines and brothers in the manor. If she married him, she would also be bullied by them. She would rather not marry in this lifetime than go to the O Manor and be laughed at. If the people from the O residence ask about it, then tell them the truth. I was the one who took her away. Suddenly, Mo Qingfeng's cold voice sounded. Her cool eyes looked at the man. Your sister will be mine from now on. You didn't raise her for nothing. Go back and calculate how much food you've spent raising her. Find a day to come to Kuqing Tower to find me. Then Mo Qingfeng stretched out his arm and hugged Fu Yanxia, who was stunned when she heard about Kuqing Lu. Then, he jumped up and flew towards Nailan Jinyu. His black robe fluttered in the air, and his black hair danced in the wind. His figure was graceful, like a fairy. The people on the ground looked at the woman who landed on Xiang Yao's back in astonishment. Their hearts were greatly shaken. Qing Lu. But Qing Lu had been established for hundreds of years and was the first successful challenger in history. The rumored cowardly and incompetent ugly Miss Mo Qi was now not only not stupid, but also astonishingly beautiful. She was as beautiful as a fairy, and also succeeded in challenging Kuqing Lu. Now, she was already the owner of Kuqing Lu. Mo Qingfeng wasn't ugly anymore, she was astonishingly beautiful. The news of her becoming the new owner of Kuqing Lu spread like a gust of wind in the Rosen continent. The first thing she did after taking over Kuqing Lu was to transform the building. She opened a medical center to sell pills. The medical center was named Thousand Ji Hole. This matter raised a storm in the imperial capital. An assassin organization actually opened a medical center. Will the patient become a dead person? Could it be that they were selling poison? Xiaoxia, did I hear wrong? She is the new owner of Kuqing Lu. The woman who persuaded Fu Yanxia just now walked to Fu Xiaoxia's side. Her voice trembled as she stared at the distant figure. Fu Xiaoxia also stared blankly at that direction. She felt her legs go soft, and a trace of fear appeared in her eyes. She was actually Mo Qingfeng. Miss Mo Qi, she is actually Miss Mo Qi. She is now the new owner of Kuqing Lu. Everyone looked up and exclaimed as they looked at the direction of Xiang Yao. The rumors were true, Miss Mo Qi really became as beautiful as a flower. Fu Yanxia had been immersed in shock ever since Mo Qingfeng took her to Xiang Yao. When they returned to Mo Qingfeng's courtyard, she was still in a daze. She didn't know if it was because of excitement or fear, but her face was pale. Mo Qingfeng didn't wake her up. She poured 2 cups of hot tea and slowly drank one while waiting for her to regain her composure. Miss Mo, this is the dessert you ordered. Young Master Nayland said that he would have a meal with Miss Mo later. Lark came in with a plate of desserts. When she passed by Fu Yanxia, she looked at her strangely. When she brought the hot tea, the girl stood there in a daze. Now that she brought the desserts, she still stood there in a daze. Is she an idiot? Yes. Mo Qingfeng nodded. Then she looked at Fu Yanxia and said to Lark, go prepare a place for this girl. Yes. Lark nodded and then left. When she passed by Fu Yanxia again, Fu Yanxia only felt a flash in front of her eyes. She finally regained her composure. Her dull eyes turned and fell on Mo Qingfeng's beautiful face. She still couldn't believe it. Mo Qingfeng saved her, so she didn't have to marry O Guchuan. Mo Qingfeng looked at her with a smile. She gently took a sip of tea and then glanced at the cup of tea opposite her. Sit down and drink a cup of tea to calm your mind. Fu Yanxia followed her gaze and looked at the cup of tea that was still steaming. She was flattered and completely sober. Suddenly she walked over and sat opposite Mo Qingfeng. She leaned over and stared at her in surprise. Are you really Miss Mo Qi? Mo Qingfeng raised her eyebrows slightly. Her reaction seemed a bit exaggerated. She smiled, call me Miss Mo in the future. She had nothing to do with the Mo Manor for a long time. She was not the 7th Miss of the Mo Manor, nor was she the 8th Wangfei of the 8th Wangfu. She liked everyone to call her Miss Mo, so you are really Mo Qingfeng. Fu Yanxia exclaimed, Miss Mo, you are so beautiful. Mo Qingfeng looked at Fu Yanxia with a smile. From Fu Yanxia's eyes, she saw her cheerfulness and perseverance. Perhaps she would be useful in the future if she kept her by her side. At least she would be very good as a maid. Have a cup of tea. Mo Qingfeng pushed the snacks in front of her. Her tone was unprecedentedly gentle. You must be hungry too. Eat this snack too. Fu Yanxia was flattered. She picked up the teacup and drank. After drinking a cup of hot tea, she suddenly felt relaxed. Mo Qingfeng picked up the teapot and poured another cup for her. Miss Mo, you poured tea for me personally. Tonight I will wake up with a smile in my dreams. Fu Yanxia held the teacup tightly and looked at Mo Qingfeng with bright eyes. Mo Qingfeng smiled. Waking up with a smile is better than waking up with a shock, right? I am smiling now, but why do I feel like I am dreaming? Fu Yanxia smiled and pinched her own face. She could clearly feel the pain. It wasn't a dream. She looked at Mo Qingfeng in surprise. Miss Mo, I'll follow you from now on. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Chapter 15-17. Although Mo Qingfeng was now famous in Chu Qiangua, Fu Yanxia felt a very casual sense of intimacy in front of her. Mo Qingfeng smiled and looked at the 2 scars on the right side of Fu Yanxia's face. When she smiled, the scars were like moving earthworms. It was a little scary. It was even uglier than her previous yin-yang face. What happened to your face? Mo Qingfeng asked faintly. Except for the 2 scars on her face, Fu Yanxia was actually a beautiful woman. Her facial features were delicate and her eyes were like bells. When she spoke, she had a smile on her face. She was very beautiful. If the scars on her face could be removed, her appearance would be one of the best in Chu Qiangua. Fu Yanxia's face withered like a withered flower. She said sullenly, when I was young, I was naughty and liked to meddle in other people's business. When I saw a group of children surrounding my big brother and punching and kicking him, I rushed to help. But I was scratched by one of the boys with a sharp branch, and then it became a scar. The one who forced you to marry your big brother. Mo Qingfeng raised her eyebrows. If it was her big brother, such a man really deserved to die. Her sister was disfigured for him, but he despised her for being ugly. No one could understand the feeling of being despised for being ugly better than Mo Qingfeng. Fu Yanxia nodded. My big brother usually treated me well. But since he married my sister-in-law, he began to dislike me. He even sold me to O Mansion and married me to O Guchuan. You don't seem to be from the capital. No, it turned out that they were from other places. Their hometown had been suffering from drought for a long time, so they couldn't grow crops. They were also close to Man Kingdom, so they were always bullied by Man Kingdom's people. They had asked the local government for help many times, but it was useless. Later, many people in the village starved to death, and the beautiful girls were caught by Man Kingdom's men. They had no choice but to travel thousands of miles to the capital. Now, they lived outside the city. In order to make a living, the young girls worked as maids, the men worked as workers, and the women helped the villagers to farm. After coming here, Fu Zhaoxia found a job in a gambling house. Later, he got addicted to gambling. Not only did he lose the job, but he also owed a lot of money to a lot of rich young masters. In the end, he wanted to marry her to O Mansion. Although it was said to be marrying, it was actually selling her to the O residents to be O Guochuan's wife. He took all the remuneration and then went to gamble. Mo Qingfeng didn't feel any sympathy for Fu Yanxia and the others. No matter what era or region, disasters would happen. After Fu Yanxia finished speaking, the lark came over and invited her to the pavilion to have dinner with Nailan Jinyu. Lark, take Yanxia to bathe and change. Mo Qingfeng glanced at Lark and walked towards the pavilion. Fu Yanxia looked at her back and sighed in her heart. Dressed in green, she was as elegant as the moon. When she arrived at the pavilion, Nailan Jinyu was already sitting there waiting for her. Seeing her walk by from afar, Nailan's gentle eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. Miss Mo, please take a seat. Nailan Jinyu made a gesture, his perfect face revealing an elegant smile. Mo Qingfeng sat down and glanced at the dishes on the table. Then, he elegantly picked up his chopsticks and asked, "Is there any movement from the O Manor?" "Yes, O Guichun is mad and is forcing Fu Xiaoxia to return the betrothal money. He is also clamoring to come to Kuqinglu to ask for her," Nailan Jinyu said gently. When he said this, a trace of contempt flashed through his gentle eyes. The O Manor is really overestimating themselves. They still dare to clamor to come to Kuqinglu to ask for her. Mo Qingfeng sneered, the betrothal money has already been returned. They still dare to come and ask for her. They didn't say anything else and ate quietly. A breeze blew, and the courtyard was filled with the fragrance of the dishes. When they were almost done eating, a petite figure suddenly appeared at the front door. She quickly walked over and stood outside the pavilion. She respectfully said to Mo Qingfeng, "Miss Mo, O Guichun brought a group of people to block the entrance of the east building. He is shouting for Miss Mo to hand her over." Mo Qingfeng raised her head and looked at Nailan Jinyu. Both of their lips curled into a contemptuous smile at the same time. "I know. Stop them and don't let them barge in," Mo Qingfeng said. They dared to barge into Kuqinglu to ask for her. It seemed that the O Manor was indeed as the rumors said. They were arrogant, daring, and domineering. O Guichuan's arrival didn't disturb Mo Qingfeng and Nailan Jinyu's enjoyment of tea. After eating, they sat in the pavilion and elegantly enjoyed the fragrant tea. "You like Fu Yanxia a lot?" Nailan Jinyu took a sip of tea. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at Mo Qingfeng. Her fine black hair hung quietly in front of her chest. It was extremely beautiful. "Yes." Mo Qingfeng responded softly. Now was the time to use people. Moreover, seeing Fu Yanxia gave her an indescribable sense of joy. They are all villagers from the same village. The drought made it impossible for them to continue living in the village, so they came to the capital. Fu Xiaoxia doesn't have any hobbies. She just recently became addicted to gambling. The other villagers can endure hardships, Nailan Jinyu said faintly. Her tone was as gentle as a breeze blowing through the forest. Mo Qingfeng nodded thoughtfully. Then, she looked towards the west. A playful smile appeared on her beautiful face. "It's time to meet O Guichun." Kuqinglu's entrance was unprecedentedly noisy. The O Manor's master, O Guichun, brought his sons and subordinates to Kuqinglu's entrance. They were making a racket, shouting that they wanted to see Mo Qingfeng. The guests and owners of the tea houses and restaurants opposite Kuqinglu, as well as passers-by, all gathered around to watch the commotion. Kuqinglu had been established for hundreds of years. Every day, the entrance was tightly shut. The surrounding area was gloomy and filled with hostility. No one had ever dared to approach Kuqinglu. Today's commotion was truly a once-in-a-century show. No matter how good the show was, how could they miss it? At this time, the tea houses and restaurants were all filled with people. They had been here since O Guichun brought people over. They had been arguing for so long, but no one came out to open the door. Could it be that the new owner was afraid of O Guichun? O Guichuan's cultivation was very high, and his martial arts were very strong. However, he might not be able to defeat Kuching Lu. Mo Qingfeng was someone who had successfully defeated Kuching Lu. Why would she be afraid of him? Just as the people of the O Manor were arguing, the entrance to Kuching Lu suddenly opened. A man in white appeared in front of everyone. His appearance was enough to cause the downfall of a country. Nalan Jinyu's body was tall, and his face was cold. His entire body emitted an awe-inspiring pressure. His deep eyes sharply swept across everyone present. The moment he appeared, it was as if the entire world fell silent. The noises of the people who were making a ruckus came to an abrupt end. They all stared blankly at the man who walked out with graceful steps. As he walked closer, a gloomy and evil aura gathered, as if a demon lord had descended from the heavens. This old man wants to see Mo Qingfeng. Oh Guichun quickly came back to his senses. His old face was filled with anger. His sharp eyes were filled with hostility. He looked at Nalan Jinyu fiercely. Nalan Jinyu walked in front of Oh Guichun. He was much taller than Oh Guichun. He had a disdainful smile on his face. His eyes were cold. He looked down at Oh Guichun and said indifferently, "Not everyone has the right to see the owner. She stole this old man's granddaughter-in-law." Oh Guichun roared. The people who were watching from the side were in an uproar. The owner of Kuching Lu wanted to steal someone. "Our owner would never do such a despicable thing," Nalan Jinyu said coldly. A woman like Mo Qingfeng could have anyone she wanted. She wanted to steal the O Manor's granddaughter-in-law. Whether it's a despicable thing or not, we'll know when Mo Qingfeng brings her out. Oh Guichun said loudly. His eyes were sharp. "Miss Yen Xia." Nalan Jinyu tilted his head slightly. He glanced at the door from the corner of his eyes. His cold voice could seep into one's bones. At this time, Fu Yanxia walked out. Everyone looked at her. When they saw the two ugly scars on her face, they were puzzled. Why did Mo Qingfeng steal an ugly person? Capture her! Oh Guichun shouted angrily when he saw Fu Yanxia. He didn't despise this ugly woman and allowed her to marry his grandson. He was already very merciful. She actually ran away from the marriage. She was a disgrace to the O family. His subordinates moved forward to capture Fu Yanxia. They were immediately stopped by two young girls. Their faces were cold and their bodies emitted a thick killing intent. "Everyone, don't listen to this old thing's nonsense." When Oh Guichun shouted that he wanted to capture Fu Yanxia was shocked. She was so scared that she almost hid behind Nalan Jinyu. However, she was still very calm. She knew that Miss Mo wouldn't let Oh Guichun easily capture her. She calmed down and stood out to explain. "This old thing forced me to marry his stupid grandson, Oh Guichun. I didn't want to, so I ran away. He sent people to capture me. Fortunately, I met Miss Mo on the way. I begged Miss Mo to save me." The more Fu Yanxia spoke, the angrier she became. She walked in front of Oh Guichun and glared at him. "Oh Guichun, I didn't want to marry Oh Guichun. Why did you force me? If the heavens didn't let me meet Miss Mo, I would have been bullied to death by your O family. You damned girl, you dare call my grandson a fool." Oh Guichun's old face was filled with anger. He glared at Fu Yanxia with hostility. Fu Yanxia raised her chin and provocatively looked at Oh Guichun. It was as if she wanted to tell him that Oh Guichun was a fool. Why would he be afraid of others talking about him? "Lord O, the situation is already clear. Miss Yanxia didn't want to marry into the O family. You forced her to marry you. You are the one who stole her." Nalan Jinyu lightly smiled. Her tone was neither fast nor slow, but everyone present could hear it. Everyone looked down on Oh Guichun. Oh Guichun was usually domineering and bullied the weak. Now that he saw Mo Qingfeng bullying him, he felt happy. Nonsense! Oh Guichun angrily roared. He looked sharply at Fu Yanxia. Fu Xiaoxia has already sold you to this old man. She even accepted the betrothal money. This means that you have already agreed to this marriage. How dare you say this old man stole you? You already sent people to carry the betrothal money back. How much did you spend to buy me? Now, I will pay you back double. Fu Yanxia took out a pouch from her waist and threw it on the ground. It was filled with gold coins. Chapter 15-18. Oh Qiao Tian's eyes burned with anger. Fu Yanxia's actions were an insult to him. You must be tired of living. Oh Qiao Tian roared. As soon as he finished speaking, his palm energy shot towards Fu Yanxia like a wild dragon. Nailan Jinyu's eyes turned cold. She wanted to stop him, but before Oh Qiao Tian's palm energy could reach Fu Yanxia, his body was sent flying by a powerful cyclone. His body flew several meters away. There were many onlookers nearby. If they wanted to save him, Oh Qiao Tian wouldn't have fallen so heavily. However, they all tacitly retreated. With a bang, Oh Qiao Tian fell in the middle of the road. The pain in his chest made it impossible for him to get up. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Master! Master! Oh Qiao Tian struggled several times but still couldn't get up. His injuries were probably not light. His two subordinates quickly helped him up and looked at him with fear. Oh Qiao Tian endured the pain in his chest and angrily shook off his two subordinates. He was the grand Oh Qiao Tian. How could he lose face in front of so many people? Just as he was about to attack the person who attacked him, his body suddenly trembled. His old eyes opened wider than his fists as he looked at Mo Qingfeng in disbelief. She was dressed in green. Her appearance was cold and her hair was as black as ink. Her innate awe-inspiring aura was emitted from her bones. She had the aura of a phoenix descending to the world that could not be ignored. Everyone present felt an icy aura slowly gather around them. They stared blankly at the elegant woman standing on the steps. Her clear and cold eyes stared straight at Oh Qiao Tian. Who are you? Oh Qiao Tian's voice trembled. He looked at Mo Qingfeng with a pale face. He didn't know what Mo Qingfeng looked like. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Whenever someone who deserved to die asked for her name, she would tell them so that they could die in peace. You're Mo Qingfeng. Oh Qiao Tian's body trembled. His eyes seemed to be filled with raging waves. His hands and his sleeves trembled. He was trying his best to control his emotions. How could this be? How could that ugly freak of the Missouri estate have such an appearance? Mo Qingfeng ignored Oh Qiao Tian's reaction and kicked the brocade pouch to Oh Qiao Tian like a stone. He waved his sleeves in a dignified manner. Take this money and scram. Qianji Tang had not opened yet. She did not want to open a killing zone here and bring bad luck. Were you the one who broke into the O residence that night? Oh Qiao Tian dragged his trembling legs towards Mo Qingfeng. When he brought people over, the unconscious person had already woken up and the secret room was still intact. Oh Qiao Tian always thought that the iron blood scripture was still in the secret room, but he didn't know that it had already been taken out. Mo Qingfeng raised his eyebrows and looked coldly at Oh Qiao Tian. He said disdainfully, "Do you think the O Manor is richer than Kuching Lu? Or do you think that there are more beautiful men in the O residence than Kuching Lu?" Indeed, compared to Kuching Lu, the O residence was not as mysterious and awe-inspiring as Kuching Lu. Although they had more people than Kuching Lu, they did not have as many beautiful men as Kuching Lu. The meaning behind Mo Qingfeng's words was very clear. The O residents did not even have the qualifications for her to break into. O Chao Tian was only trying to flatter himself. The onlookers all pointed at O Chao Tian and whispered. Some of the braver ones couldn't help but laugh. O Chao Tian's face turned white and green at Mo Qingfeng's words. His mouth twitched and he couldn't say anything. He looked at Mo Qingfeng with a trace of shock. Could it really be her? She came back. What if she didn't come back? Who was it that wanted the iron blood scripture? Mo Qingfeng coldly looked at O Chao Tian. Master O, take your people and leave. You are a smart person. Do you want to become enemies with me because of a girl? When O Chao Tian saw her appearance, the shock in his eyes was so great that his whole body trembled. How could it escape Mo Qingfeng's eyes? His reaction was definitely not because he saw an ugly person suddenly become beautiful. Instead, she suddenly thought of Duge Nan. The iron blood scripture, the iron blood bat, Duge Nan. Was she related to the O residents? O Chao Tian was still staring at Mo Qingfeng in a daze. From the moment he got up until now, his gaze had never left her face. The onlookers thought that he had taken a fancy to Mo Qingfeng's beauty. He was really a lecherous old man who didn't know how to repent even when death was near. In this situation, he still dared to stare at her face. Young Master Nalan, I'll leave this to you. If they don't leave, then do as you see fit. Mo Qingfeng turned around and glanced at Nalan Jinyu. Her voice was cold without a trace of warmth. Nalan Jinyu softly grunted and watched her walk into Kuching Pavilion. Her steps were slow and her back was straight. Her green robes were like leaves and she was as beautiful as the moon. Fu Yanxiao looked left and right. It seemed that there was nothing for her to do here. She didn't even look at O Chao Tian and quickly chased after Mo Qingfeng. Everyone was amazed by her devastatingly beautiful appearance and even more amazed by her graceful bearing. O Chao Tian stared blankly at the figure that was gradually disappearing from his sight. The words stuck in his throat couldn't be said. Was she really back? You don't need to follow me. Go back to your room and rest. After walking into Kuching Pavilion, Mo Qingfeng suddenly stopped and said to Fu Yanxiao who was following behind her. Fu Yanxiao was startled. You don't need me to serve you. Come find me at Qing Axian Pavilion tomorrow morning. Okay, Miss Mo. Then I'll go back and rest. After Fu Yanxiao left, Mo Qingfeng didn't return to Qing Axian Pavilion. Instead, she went to the alchemy room. The alchemy room was decorated exactly the same as the one in her space. Currently, only she and Nalan Jinyu could enter the alchemy room. In front of the door, she had designed a fingerprint switch. To her, the alchemy room was an important place. Not just anyone could enter. Alchemy required a calm mind. She couldn't be irritable or impatient. The herbs needed for alchemy were all neatly placed in various shelves and cabinets. The names of the herbs were engraved on the front of each cabinet. When the herbs were needed, they could be quickly found. The shelves were divided into 3 sections. The first section was for rare and precious herbs. The second section was for high-quality herbs. The third section was for ordinary herbs. There was also a small attic inside. There was a bench made of mahogany in the attic. When Mo Qingfeng was tired from alchemy, she would lie down on the bench to rest. In the alchemy room, she couldn't hear any noise from outside. The day after tomorrow, Qianji Hall would officially open. The promised 10 pills had already been successfully refined. Mo Qingfeng came to the attic and sat on the bench. She took out the iron blood scripture pill scroll and carefully pondered over the refining method inside. The Iron Blood Scripture Pill Scroll recorded the refining method of divine pills and miraculous medicines. It was very detailed. How much medicine to use, what kind of herbs to use, and how to burn them were all recorded clearly. However, Mo Qingfeng had never heard of many of the names of the herbs. She didn't even know what they looked like. She wanted to refine the soul-condensing divine pill, but there were many rare herbs recorded in the scroll. Other than 3 common herbs, she had never heard of the rest in her previous life. Ghost-faced soul-shaking flower, spirit heavenly grass, wild orchid leaf. What kind of herbs were these? It was impossible to refine pills without herbs. Herbs were the parents of the pills. Without these herbs, would the pills still be pills? Mo Qingfeng's slender fingers gently stroked the Iron Blood Scripture Pill Scroll. Her expression was deep. Duge Zinan's figure suddenly flashed through her mind. Perhaps Duge Zinan knew these herbs and where to find them. Thinking of Duge Zinan, Mo Qingfeng couldn't help but frown. In the blink of an eye, 20 days had passed. He should have returned to Duge Castle, right? When would he come to the capital to find her? Since she didn't have these herbs, it was impossible for her to refine pills. Putting away the Iron Blood Scripture Pill Scroll, she disappeared from the spot and entered the space. Nothing had changed in the space. She still insisted on going to the space to cultivate, soak in the spirit spring, and drink it every day. Dominators of the world, won't you go crazy if you cultivate like this? Coming to the side of the wooden bucket, Mo Qingfeng looked down at the dominators of the world in the bucket. After taking it out of the spirit spring, it was like a withered flower. Even its feathers had lost their luster. But after putting it back in the bucket, it didn't take long for it to become spirited again. Its feathers would also regain their original luster. It wasn't an ordinary chicken. Before, Mo Qingfeng thought it became beautiful because of the spirit spring. But later, she realized it wasn't an ordinary chicken. It seemed like it couldn't live without the spirit spring. She really didn't know where Chu Mukin got this extraordinary rooster from to marry her. Ever since the rooster soaked in the spirit spring, its body grew rapidly. Mo Qingfeng didn't know how many times she had changed the bucket. Seeing its body grow again, it seemed like she would have to change a bigger bucket tomorrow. After hearing Mo Qingfeng's voice, the dominators of the world lazily opened its eyes. Its eyes were extremely bright as it looked at Mo Qingfeng. It didn't know how to express itself, but seeing Mo Qingfeng, its bright eyes revealed a trace of excitement. Take your time soaking. After a busy day, it's my turn to soak. Mo Qingfeng smiled and walked towards the spirit spring while taking off her outer robe. After soaking in the spirit spring, Mo Qingfeng sat cross-legged next to the spirit spring and closed her eyes to cultivate. Cough cough. When her qi reached her dantian, her chest suddenly felt stuffy. She couldn't help but cough violently. She opened her eyes and covered her chest with one hand. Why was it like this? It had been like this for the past few days. When cultivating, her chest would always feel stuffy. If she used a bit of strength, it would be like being pricked by needles. When sleeping at night, it would feel like there was a huge rock pressing down on her chest. It was so stuffy that even breathing was difficult. What was going on? Was it because she had been so busy recently that her breathing was unstable? But she didn't feel tired at all. How could her breathing be unstable? She took a deep breath and drank a few mouthfuls of spirit spring water before continuing to cultivate. She tried to slowly circulate her qi through her meridians and then condense it in her dantian. From there, she channeled it into her meridians. Chapter 15:19. Pooh! Her meridians and chest were in pain. She felt a sweet taste in her throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. She leaned forward and used her hands to support herself so that she wouldn't fall to the ground. Looking at the bright red blood on the ground, Mo Qingfeng's beautiful face was as pale as paper. The blood in her mouth didn't stop flowing. Drops of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth and soon dyed her chin red. Cold sweat instantly appeared on her forehead. Her arms that were supporting her on the ground kept trembling. What happened? Could it be that he had gone berserk? Why did all the meridians in his body feel as if they were being burned by fire? Why did he feel a searing pain? World dominators felt her pain and flew out of the bucket and landed in front of Mo Qingfeng. Looking at the blood on the ground and her pale face, World Dominator's eyes were filled with worry. However, he couldn't help her relieve the pain. His two bright eyes were filled with worry as he looked straight at Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng was panting and trying her best to endure the pain. She looked up and saw World Dominator's worried and helpless expression. She smiled and said, "I'm fine. I'll be fine after resting for a while." Mo Qingfeng was in so much pain that she didn't have the strength to sit up. She slowly fell to the ground and closed her eyes. She was trying her best to endure the pain. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat and her face was pale. World Dominators walked to her side and patted her chest with his wings. He looked at Mo Qingfeng with worry in his eyes. It was as if he was saying, "Wait until I cultivate and become a demonized human. I won't let you suffer this pain again." The burning pain in his meridians lasted for an hour. World Dominators had also stayed by Mo Qingfeng's side for an hour. After an hour, the lustrous feathers on his body had dimmed, and his worried eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of fog. He looked very listless, just like a sick chicken. After the pain disappeared, Mo Qingfeng slowly opened her eyes. She moved her fingers and wiped the cold sweat on her forehead with her sleeve. Her face was still pale and bloodless. She turned her head and looked at World Dominators, who was lying on her arm listlessly. Her hazy eyes revealed a trace of worry. She smiled and said with a hoarse voice, "Go back and soak in the spirit spring. I'm fine." World Dominators did not move and continued to look at her quietly. "Maybe it's because I've been cultivating too much recently and overworked myself. That's why I'm like this. After resting for so long, I'm fine now." Mo Qingfeng sat up and took out a silk handkerchief. She wet it with spirit spring water and wiped the blood off the ground. When World Dominators saw that she was really fine and that his body couldn't take it anymore, he returned to the bucket and continued to soak in the spirit spring water. Mo Qingfeng stopped cultivating. After drinking a few mouthfuls of spirit spring water, he lay on the soft bed and slept for the night. In the middle of the night, his chest started to feel stuffy again, as if there was a huge rock pressing down on it. He needed to use a lot of strength to breathe, or else he would feel suffocated. She felt better after sitting up. Throughout the long night, she leaned against the headboard and kept rubbing her chest. How could this be? Mo Qingfeng was puzzled. Could it be that he had used too much power and sealed his dantian? She checked her own pulse. His pulse was chaotic and his breathing was unstable. It didn't seem like his dantian was sealed. She hadn't been injured recently, so why did his meridians burn? She didn't sleep much and came out of the space at dawn. She didn't stay in the pill refining room and walked out directly. Outside, Nailan Jinyu had been waiting for a long time. Seeing her beautiful figure walk out, Nailan Jinyu's handsome face revealed a gentle smile. But as she approached, he saw that her face was very pale and his smile disappeared. His gentle and beautiful eyes flashed with concern and worry. "Miss Mo, were you refining pills last night?" Mo Qingfeng didn't say anything. She looked at Nailan Jinyu meaningfully. "Did you wait for a long time? Why didn't you go in? The lark said you were in the pill refining room and didn't return to the Pure Heart Pavilion. You were refining pills, so I didn't go in to disturb you." Nalan Jinyu said softly. Go back, eat breakfast and rest. You look terrible. Looking at her pale and transparent face, Nalan Jinyu's heart ached slightly. He really wanted to share her burden. Miss M.O., if you need help with refining pills, just let me know. N. M.O. Qingfeng responded and walked to the Pure Heart Pavilion. In the Pure Heart Pavilion, Fu Yanxia was already prepared to wait in the pavilion. Miss M.O., young Master Nalan, please eat breakfast. Seeing M.O. Qingfeng and Nalan Jinyu walking over, Fu Yanxia's eyes lit up. Looking at them, they looked like fairies who had descended to the mortal world. They were very compatible. M.O. Qingfeng walked over. When she passed in front of Fu Yanxia, her eyes looked deeply at the smiling Fu Yanxia. Then she frowned slightly. Her smile was so bright, but the two scars on her face were so ugly. After eating breakfast hastily, M.O. Qingfeng asked Fu Yanxia to go back to the Pure Heart Pavilion with her. Nalan Jinyu went to manage the affairs of Kuqing Lu. M.O. Qingfeng was now the owner of Kuqing Lu, so she had the right to speak. However, she was currently only managing the opening of the medical center. Nalan Jinyu was still in charge of the assassin organization. Kuqing Lu was a huge organization. It was like a modern international group. Just having a president wasn't enough. There needed to be a right-hand man to manage it. Nalan Jinyu was her right-hand man now. In her previous life, she was spoiled by Maupassant and the others, which raised her to be strong. Now that she was reborn, she was also strong. She hoped to use the skills she liked to create her own world in Chu Qiangua. Miss M.O., what orders do you have? When they arrived at M.O. Qingfeng's room, Fu Yanxia's gaze followed her body. Her gaze didn't avoid her. M.O. Qingfeng had a face that could cause the downfall of a country, so she boldly admired it. Perhaps it was because of her straightforwardness that M.O. Qingfeng didn't dislike. Have you eaten breakfast? M.O. Qingfeng took out a small medicine box made of tiger skin and placed it on the table. Then, she opened it. Her white and slender fingers took out two sharp knives. The knives were shining coldly. Then, she took out two white porcelain medicine bottles and a few pieces of gauze. Fu Yanxia scratched her head and smiled embarrassedly. I couldn't help but eat two pieces of pastries when I was making breakfast for Miss M.O. in the kitchen. M.O. Qingfeng paused and looked at her deeply. 2 pieces of pastries and you're full. I won't feel hungry after drinking a cup of hot tea. Fu Yanxia said. Then, she looked at the things on the table in confusion. Miss M.O., what are you doing? Have you washed your face? Fu Yanxia was startled. I washed my face when I woke up. M.O. Qingfeng glanced at the rocking chair in front of the bed. Bring that rocking chair over. Okay. Fu Yanxia moved quickly and immediately brought the rocking chair over. Just as she put it down, M.O. Qingfeng said indifferently, lie down. Me? Fu Yanxia was startled. She looked up at M.O. Qingfeng. I lie down. This was the rocking chair where Miss M.O. usually lay down to read and rest. It wasn't good for her to lie down, right? Soon, Fu Yanxia seemed to have thought of something. Before M.O. Qingfeng said anything, she suddenly lay down and even brushed away the hair sticking to her face. Lying on the rocking chair, Fu Yanxia was excited and her heart beat faster. M.O. Qingfeng took a piece of gauze and folded it neatly, leaving only a palm-sized area. Then, she poured the 2 bottles of medicine powder evenly on the gauze. Suddenly, a very unpleasant and heavy smell of medicine wafted in the air. Fu Yanxia looked at the busy M.O. Qingfeng excitedly and secretly swore in her heart that no matter life or death, she would follow Miss M.O. and be her most loyal servant. Miss M.O. Suddenly, a figure appeared. Mo Qingfeng was already standing on top of her head. Fu Yanxia looked up and saw Mo Qingfeng wearing a veil. She held a small knife that emitted a cold light in one hand and a gauze with medicine powder in the other. Fu Yanxia was a bit panicked when she saw the small knife shining with cold light. When the knife goes down, it will hurt a bit. Bear with it. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. She was wearing a veil, so Fu Yanxia could only see her clear and cold eyes. Fu Yanxia's body trembled. She seemed to have seen an Asura that just crawled out of hell to take her life. No, Mo. Fu Yanxia wanted to get up and ask clearly. Wasn't it enough to treat her face with medicine powder? Why did she have to use a knife? Just as she moved, Mo Qingfeng quickly used the handle of the knife to poke her chest twice. She could only obediently lie down on the rocking chair quietly. There was a trace of fear in her eyes as she looked at Mo Qingfeng. She had poked her acupuncture points. Mo Qingfeng looked at her meaningfully. There was a faint smile in her cold eyes. After carefully observing the two scars on her face, she raised the knife. Fu Yanxia only saw a cold light flash in front of her eyes and then a trace of pain came from her face. Mo Qingfeng's movements were as fast as lightning. The dead flesh on the scars was cut off and fell to the ground. The gauze on the other hand quickly covered the new wound so that the blood didn't flow out. When the gauze was applied to the wound, Fu Yanxia felt a chill and then a numbness came from her face. Miss Mo, is it done? Fu Yanxia saw Mo Qingfeng packing up the medicine box and asked in a daze. Her face was cured in just a few seconds? Even a god couldn't do it so fast. Mo Qingfeng said while packing up the tools, the two scars from before have been cut off. The medicine on your face is the skin revitalizing cream and the healing pill powder. It can quickly heal your new wounds. New wounds, but I don't feel any pain at all. When she was cut by the tree branch, she bled a lot and cried for a few days in pain. After Mo Qingfeng packed up, she left a piece of white gauze and looked at Fu Yanxia deeply. You can't touch your wounds for 3 hours. Just lie on the rocking chair and rest. I'll come back to treat your wounds in 3 hours. Watching Mo Qingfeng walk out of the house, Fu Yanxia was suddenly moved to tears. Her eyes were hot. When she was making breakfast, she met the lark. The lark said that it envied her for being valued by Mo Qingfeng. At that time, she didn't believe the lark's words and thought that Mo Qingfeng was so good to everyone. Now, she believed that Mo Qingfeng's eyes weren't cold when looking at her. Chapter 15:20. So this was what it felt like to be valued. She wasn't loved by her parents since she was young. Ever since she was disfigured, she was mocked by others. She never dreamed that she would meet such a good girl like Mo Qingfeng in the capital. The 23rd of this month was the opening day of 1000G Hall. In order to get the soul concentrating pill for free, there were already people lining up. It opened at 7 in the morning, but before 7 in the morning, there was already a sea of people at the door of Kuching building. Some of them even came from other places just for this free soul concentrating pill. It was said that if a cultivator took this soul concentrating pill, their power would increase rapidly, and it could also heal internal injuries. There were also many people who came to see Mo Qingfeng. Ever since Mo Qingfeng saved the unconscious imperial censor Gao at Chu Mu Chen's birthday banquet, her fame gradually spread in the capital. It was said that for the first 15 days after 1000G Hall opened, Mo Qingfeng would give the first 30 patients free treatment and medicine. No matter what era it was, there were still many people who were greedy for small gains. Some patients who had been sick for years heard that they could get free treatment and medicine, so they rushed to Kuching building before the sun rose. At this time, they were fighting to get to the front of the line. Several people started fighting because they cut the line. The scene was very chaotic. At 7 a.m., 1000G Hall's door opened on time. The people who had been waiting for a long time surged forward, pushing and trampling each other as they fought to be the first to enter 1000G Hall. The shouts were getting louder and louder. Some of the older people were pushed down, but the people behind them didn't even help them up. They just stepped on their bodies and walked past. The chaotic scene was like a war in troubled times. Mo Qingfeng didn't like this scene very much. The people who rushed in didn't care about Kuching Building's people stopping them. If it wasn't for the solid door, it would have been broken by this group of fierce people. All of you, be quiet. Mo Qingfeng shouted. Her cold eyes were frighteningly sinister. Her shout definitely wouldn't make them quiet down. Pang! With a wave of her white sleeve, a white light like a stormy sea crashed into their bodies like madmen. They were knocked back several steps. When the people behind saw this, they didn't dare to go forward. They stared blankly at the beautiful woman standing in front of them. They weren't scared by her coldness, but by her peerless beauty. They had long heard that the Mo Manor's 7th Miss had become beautiful, but they didn't expect her to be this beautiful. Even a fairy couldn't compare to her. Mo Qingfeng looked at them coldly. His entire body emitted a soul-shaking chill and eeriness. His sharp and cold eyes swept across everyone present. He said sternly, "So what if we rushed into 1000G Hall? You can get the soul concentrating pill if you rush in first. Can I treat you for free? Didn't you say that the first to arrive on the opening day of 1000G Hall can get the soul condensing pill?" When a man in a green robe saw Mo Qingfeng's appearance, he was slightly stunned at first, and then asked arrogantly in a loud voice. Mo Qingfeng looked at him indifferently. "That's right. The first 10 to arrive at 1000G Hall will receive a soul condensing pill for free. May I ask if you are one of the first 10 to arrive?" Hearing Mo Qingfeng's question, the green-robed man's expression changed slightly. A hint of embarrassment flashed across his handsome face. When he arrived, there was already a dense crowd at the entrance of the 1000G Hall. How could he be in the top 10? But he was one of the top 10 who rushed into 1000G Hall. "I've already stepped into 1000G Hall. You can count if I'm one of the top 10. The man raised his chin. He looked indescribably arrogant. Mo Qingfeng sneered and turned around. She slowly walked to the consultation table and sat down. She picked up the teacup and slowly drank the ginseng tea. Her movements were a little lazy. Her peerless appearance and noble and cold aura made her seem a little enchanting. Everyone present was dumbfounded by her beauty. "Young Master Nalan, give the soul concentrating pill to the people who came in first." Mo Qingfeng took a sip of the ginseng tea. Her voice was indifferent. Her innate awe-inspiring aura made people unable to resist. After that, Nalan Jinyu, who was dressed in white, walked out like an immortal. His expression was cold, and his entire body exuded a noble and cold aura. The moment he appeared, everyone present immediately held their breaths and looked at him timidly. Mo Qingfeng's appearance caused them to stop abruptly because they were amazed by her peerless beauty. Nalan Jinyu's appearance caused them to hold their breaths because they could smell a hint of hostility from his cold aura. Today, Nalan Jinyu was different from his usual gentleness. He stood coldly in front of everyone. The aura of a man and a woman could not be underestimated. Nalan Jinyu slowly approached them. His cold eyes swept over them like a hawk. His speed was slow. Whichever person his eyes landed on, their heart would beat faster. As he got closer, the air became more oppressive. It was as if there was a lack of oxygen. In the end, Nalan Jinyu pointed out 10 people. In fact, there were 8 men, a middle-aged woman, and an old woman. The 10 people who were pointed out stood in front of Mo Qingfeng, trembling. Their faces couldn't hide their excitement. Mo Qingfeng glanced at them indifferently. Then, she said to the veiled woman in purple standing behind her, "Yanxia, give the soul-concentrating pills to them." "Yes, Miss Mo," Fu Yanxia, who was holding a tray, responded. Then, she walked out. On the tray were 10 small white porcelain bottles. Each bottle contained a soul-concentrating pill. Fu Yanxia gave the pills to them one by one. Then, she returned to her original position. "Thank you, Miss Mo. Thank you, Miss Mo." The people who received the soul-concentrating pills kept kowtowing to Mo Qingfeng. Their voices were trembling with surprise. The soul-concentrating pill can increase your cultivation. It can also heal internal injuries. You can take it whenever you like. Mo Qingfeng took a sip of the ginseng tea and said indifferently, "You can go back now that you've received the soul-concentrating pills." The people who received the soul-concentrating pills today wouldn't give them free treatment and medicine. They knew this. To them, treatment was a small matter. The soul-concentrating pill was a big matter. "We got here first. Why did they get the soul-concentrating pills and not us?" "That's right. We were the first to get to 1000G Hall. We came in the middle of the night. Why didn't you give us the soul-concentrating pills? Are they from Kuqing Lu? You Kuqing Lu can't bear to give the pills to outsiders, so you gave them to your own people." "That's right." The people who received the soul-concentrating pills were about to leave, but they were stopped by the group of people who just rushed in. They angrily shouted at Nailan Jinyu. They didn't plan on letting the people who received the soul-concentrating pills leave. Their eyes were burning with anger as if they wanted to snatch the soul-concentrating pills. Nailan Jinyu's face was dark as he coldly glanced at them. Kuqing Lu had been established for hundreds of years, but this was the first time someone barged in and shouted at them. If Mo Qingfeng wasn't here, he would have lost control and kicked them out. Mo Qingfeng's expression was calm. She wasn't angry, nor was she cold. Her beautiful face even revealed a deep smile. She gently put down the teacup. Every move she made was so elegant and noble. Then she got up and slowly walked over. She was graceful and peerless. The people who were shouting suddenly quieted down. They held their breaths as they looked at this noble and cold woman who was as beautiful as a fairy. Standing in front of them, Mo Qingfeng was like a noble queen. Her beautiful eyes contained a profound smile as she glanced at the noisy people one by one. "You said you came to 1000G Hall in the middle of the night." Mo Qingfeng looked at the young man in front of her. The man had a handsome face and gave people a very arrogant feeling. "That's right." The man arrogantly replied. He even raised his chin like a proud little peacock. His arrogance was cultivated and spoiled by his family. Mo Qingfeng coldly smiled. "An hour ago, you were eating breakfast at Happy House. After eating breakfast, you leisurely came to 1000G Hall to wait. When the door opened, you pushed an old lady down and stepped on her. May I ask if it was the middle of the night an hour ago?" When the man heard this, his expression changed slightly. He was slightly embarrassed, but when he thought of how big his family was, his arrogance quickly rose. Just as he was about to curse, Mo Qingfeng's dark eyes swept over them. She suddenly shouted, "Don't play the game of fishing in troubled waters with me. Whoever came to 1000G Hall first will have the right to get the soul-concentrating pill and have the right to be treated by me for free. Those who stepped on other people's backs will all be ignored. You. Whether or not you're one of the top 10 who came to 1000G Hall, you don't know, but I know very well." They were rendered speechless for a moment. Indeed, they were not the first 10 people to come to the 1000G Hall to wait, and before the 1000G Hall opened, the news that was sent out was indeed so. The first 10 people to wait outside the 1000G hall would receive a soul-condensing pill. In order to fight for the soul-concentrating pill, when 1000G hall opened, they didn't care about anything. They fought to be the first to push people back and even injured people in front. They were the first batch to break into 1000G hall, but it didn't mean they were the first 10 who came. But what kind of place was Clear House? How could it allow them to cheat? After Mo Qingfeng coldly swept over them, her eyes fell on Nailan Jinyu. She looked at him deeply. Take the first 30 patients to the clinic. Nailan Jinyu nodded. Then, she found the first 30 patients from the hundreds of people and took them to the clinic. Nailan Jinyu left and returned. The 30 patients were already arranged to be in the clinic. There were people from Clear House guarding there. Mo Qingfeng looked deeply at the rest of the people. If you want to buy pills, you can go to the pill trading house. If you want to see a doctor, wait until afternoon and come find me. After speaking, Mo Qingfeng didn't look at them again. She directly handed them over to Nailan Jinyu and the Lark and turned to leave. Suddenly, her eyes turned cold. A dangerous murderous aura came from behind. Before Nailan Jinyu could make a move, Mo Qingfeng turned around and waved her white sleeve. Ah! A scream sounded. The arrogant man just now flew up and then fell heavily on the ground. His chest hurt and he spat out blood. Chapter 15:21. Mo Qingfeng's face was cold as she walked towards the man step by step. Her slender eyes were filled with a frightening sharpness and killing intent. Her palm was already condensed with true qi, and her entire body was emitting a gloomy cold aura. She was like a malicious spirit that had just crawled out of hell. Everyone was so scared by her that they trembled all over. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly as they all looked at the woman who was like a malicious spirit. The man on the ground was also scared. He regretted his impulsiveness. He believed that if this woman wanted to take his life, it would be a simple matter. He wanted to get up, but the pain in his chest made it difficult for him to even struggle, let alone stand up. He looked at Mo Qingfeng in fear and kept shaking his head, as if begging her not to kill him. I'll let you know the consequences of attacking me from behind. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. The qi gathered in her palm was released and like a wild dragon, it spun and attacked the man. Pang! Just as everyone thought that the man's life was about to be taken by this whirlwind, a purple light suddenly shot over their heads like a gust of wind. At the critical moment, it blocked Mo Qingfeng's white light. Miss Mo, please be merciful. Soon, an old voice came from outside. Everyone turned around and saw that it was Xiao Tian. They all opened up a path for him. Mo Qingfeng looked coldly at Xiao Tian who walked in. He was wearing a light yellow robe today and still looked domineering and noble. However, in front of Mo Qingfeng, he restrained his claws and didn't dare to be too presumptuous. Grandfather, save me. When the man saw Xiao Tian, he was like a drowning man who had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. He immediately forgot about the pain in his chest and quickly got up to grab Xiao Tian's arm. He pointed at Mo Qingfeng and said angrily, "This woman doesn't know what's good for her, she's gone too far. She injured me in front of so many people. Grandfather, you have to get justice for me. Bastard!" Xiao Tian waved his arm and gave the man a resounding slap. His eyes were burning with anger as he roared, "Is this a place for you to shout? Is Miss Mo someone you can point at and curse?" The young man never thought that his grandfather, who had always doted on him, would slap him in front of so many people. He forgot all about the pain and looked at Xiao Tian in disbelief. The corner of his mouth kept twitching. Mo Qingfeng only sneered in response to Xiao Tian's anger. She swept her gaze across everyone like a queen and sternly said, 1000G Hall is open for business. If you want to cause trouble, then Kuching Pavilion will accompany you to the end. Don't blame Kuching Pavilion for being ruthless then. By the way, let me remind you that Kuching Lu will only accept missions to kill people. He will definitely not accept missions to serve people. He will not open the door for some playboys to arrogantly challenge him. Don't think that just because I'm being nice to you, you can bully me like I'm your grandson. The person who wants to bully me hasn't even been born yet. Miss Mo, I'm really sorry. I'll discipline him well when we get back. When Oh Chow Tian heard this, his heart trembled and he immediately smiled apologetically. Everyone was flabbergasted. Why did the usually domineering Lord O become a coward in front of Mo Qingfeng? Even Oh Chow Tian had to respect Mo Qingfeng. They couldn't afford to offend her. A few men who wanted to cause trouble with the young man immediately lost their fire. They didn't dare to make a sound. They stood to the side and silently watched. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Mo Qingfeng coldly looked at Oh Chow Tian. Her entire body trembled as she coldly said, I don't want to see anyone from the O clan appear in 1000G Hall again. In other words, 1000G Hall won't do business with the O clan. Oh Chow Tian's expression slightly changed. A strange light flashed through his muddy eyes. The O clan was a reputable family in the Chu Qian country. Rumor has it that Oh Chow Tian's deceased father and the current emperor were sworn brothers. Oh Chow Tian's wife was the daughter of the Chu Qian country's prince, Princess Lianhua. Although the O clan couldn't compare to the imperial palace, they still had a certain amount of power. For example, Oh Chow Tian was the dignified lord of the O clan. He could do whatever he wanted in the imperial capital. Everyone who saw him would respectfully call him Lord O. As for his descendants, they were incomparably arrogant and tyrannical. Even though the commoners were dissatisfied with them, they did not dare to voice it out. The owners of those restaurants knew very well that the people from the O residence would dine and dash. Yet, they had never disliked them. Today, Mo Qingfeng said in front of so many people that she didn't want to see anyone from the O clan appear in 1000G Hall. This made Oh Chow Tian feel that this was the first time in his life that he had suffered such humiliation. But in front of Mo Qingfeng, he was like a withered blade of grass. He couldn't resist at all. He could only bury the unwillingness and hatred deep in his heart. He nodded and bowed to Mo Qingfeng. Miss Mo, don't be angry. When this old man goes back, I will discipline my grandson well. In the future, other than going to 1000G Hall to see a doctor and buy pills, he won't cause trouble. Mo Qingfeng looked at him coldly, then looked deeply at Nailan Jinyu. She said coldly, I'll leave this place to you. If anyone causes trouble, throw their heads out. Nailan Jinyu nodded. He exuded a strong aura of killing intent. It was so oppressive that everyone present didn't even dare to breathe loudly, let alone cause trouble. Grandfather, you're letting that woman go just like that. The young man saw Mo Qingfeng walk inside and was angry and impatient. Scram! Immediately go back and reflect on your mistakes. Oh Chow Tian suddenly roared at the young man. The veins on his face were bulging and his eyes were sharp. The young man was startled at first, then puzzled. Grandfather, what did he do wrong? Why was grandfather yelling at him like this? Scram! Oh Chow Tian roared again. The hands in his sleeves were tightly clenched. If the young man didn't scram, he would slap him away. Humph! The young man was very angry. He gritted his teeth and glared at the direction Mo Qingfeng left. Then, he waved his sleeves and walked out of 1000G Hall unwillingly and angrily. Damn woman! When he was more capable, he would definitely find her to settle the score. For the convenience of seeing a doctor, the consultation room was decorated no different from modern times. Mo Qingfeng's office was like a modern doctor's office. It was neatly arranged and had pen and paper. Before the patients came in, they had to take a number. Whoever's turn to see a doctor would come in. Those who didn't have their turn would all wait in the courtyard. There were a few towering trees in the courtyard and a pavilion. They could move chairs under the trees to cool down. Thousand-Ji Hall provided free tea for them to drink. The people sitting in line were full of praise. Mo Qingfeng was also very strange. Why did she come here? How did she know so much about seeing a doctor? If Daddy and Mommy knew that she had such ability, would they be very happy? Especially Mommy, she would be very happy. Now that she was amazing, she could almost know what illness the patient had just by feeling the pulse. Then, she could see the patient's face and tongue and prescribe the right medicine. She was in charge of seeing patients. When she needed to write a prescription, she would tell Fu Yanxia, who was sitting next to her. Fu Yanxia would write it down. After the consultation and the prescription was written, the patient would take the prescription to Thousand-Ji Hall's pharmacy to get the medicine. The first 30 patients were quickly seen. Fortunately, these 30 patients didn't have any serious illnesses. Next was the charging consultation. The number of people was still planned to be 30 because there were too many people coming to see a doctor. Those who wanted Mo Qingfeng to see a doctor had to hand over their most precious things. Whether it was gold, silver, jewelry, all kinds of jewelry, spiritual weapons, etc. As long as it could move Mo Qingfeng, she would see the other party. Otherwise, there was no need to talk about it. Regarding such a rule, some people were happy and some were worried. Those who could take out treasures naturally didn't have any objections. However, those who couldn't could only leave dejectedly and didn't dare to say anything. After all, Thousand-Ji Hall opened the door to do business. Seeing 30 patients for free every day was already very benevolent. In the evening, Mo Qingfeng returned to Qingxin Pavilion from Thousand-Ji Hall. After dinner, she took a walk in the courtyard. At this time, Fu Yanxia hurried over. "Miss Mo, there's a young man looking for you. He says he's Zhou Yuding." Mo Qingfeng raised her eyebrows with interest. "Looking for me?" Looking for her, not asking to see her. The people of the O family were quite arrogant. This Zhou Yuding had suffered a loss once and still dared to look for her so arrogantly. Yes, he even had people carry him into Thousand-Ji Hall's main hall. That's a big scene. If he's here to see a doctor, let him go back. Other than the pill trade, I won't see anyone at night. Yes, I'll go tell him now. With that, Fu Yanxia quickly walked to Thousand-Ji Hall. After a while, she returned. Under the veil, she looked at Mo Qingfeng with an awkward expression. "Miss Mo, Yuding said he won't leave until he sees you today." Mo Qingfeng raised her eyebrows. Her gaze was cold. "Why is he looking for me?" "He said he wants Miss Mo to see a doctor for him." "Then let him wait. Wait until tomorrow, I'll see him for free." "Miss Mo, why don't you go take a look?" "Yanxia doesn't think that person is Zhou Yuding." Fu Yanxia said. Zhou Yuding's reputation was very bad. Almost everyone in the capital knew him. Fu Yanxia had seen Zhou Yuding before. Although this dandy young master's reputation wasn't good, he still looked decent. However, the person in the main hall didn't seem to be Zhou Yuding. Zhou Yuding's face wouldn't be so ugly. Mo Qingfeng looked at Fu Yanxia coldly. Someone actually dares to impersonate Zhou Yuding and come to Thousand-Ji Hall to cause trouble. Does young Master Naila not care? Fu Yanxia pursed her lips. Young Master Nalan wanted to kick them out, but the other person walked into Thousand-Ji Hall and said it was Miss Mo who injured him. In order to not let them ruin Miss Mo's reputation, young Master Nalan had to let them wait in the main hall. In the main hall of Thousand Ji Hall, Nalan Jinyu and Kuching Lu were busy. There was a bamboo chair placed near the door, and a green-robed man was lying on it. Behind him stood two youths. One of them was a purple-robed youth who had a deep frown on his face. He looked extremely impatient, and the hostility hidden in his eyes was about to erupt at any moment. "Young master, 2 hours have passed. That woman still hasn't come out. What does she mean by this?" The young man in purple couldn't hold it in and said angrily. Chapter 1522. She will definitely come out. The blue-clothed man lying on the bamboo chair said. His voice was very familiar. Listening carefully, one would know that it was Oh Guoding. However, his face was so swollen that it was almost unrecognizable. Not only was the shape of his face changed, even his eyes were narrowed into a line. She hasn't come out after 2 hours, and she doesn't even serve tea. What is the meaning of this? Does she not put the young master in her eyes? The purple-clothed youth said angrily. He had been by Oh Guoding's side for many years, but this was the first time he had encountered such a situation. A woman actually didn't put his young master in her eyes. Besides, his young master was here to seek medical treatment. Thousand Ji Hall opened to treat people. Now that the patient had come to their door, they actually refused to come. What was the meaning of this? It was this woman who didn't put his young master in her eyes at all. Thinking of this, the purple-clothed young master was angry. "Ah, Dong, calm down." The blue-clothed youth standing beside the purple-clothed youth looked deeply at the purple-clothed youth. In fact, he was also angry in his heart, but the young master hadn't shown his power yet. As subordinates, there was no use in being anxious. Is a small Thousand Ji Hall worthy of making us wait for so long? At this time, a youth in embroidered clothes strode in and said arrogantly in front of Oh Guoding. He was Oh Guoding's younger brother, Oh Guoxian. Although he wasn't a romantic, he was arrogant and looked down on everyone. His reputation in the capital wasn't good. "Big brother, in the entire capital, it's not just that woman who knows how to treat patients. Why are you waiting here? I don't believe that other doctors can't cure your illness." Oh Guoxian said angrily, looking hatefully at Nalan Jinyu who was busy at the side. "Little brother Xian, you have to calm down." Oh Guoding said weakly. His throat was sore, his chest was stuffy, and it was difficult to breathe. His body was swollen like a pig, and a light touch would cause him to grimace in pain. His skin was extremely itchy, and it scratched his heart and lungs. This illness had been going on for several days. He had run all over the capital to find famous doctors. Even the imperial doctor in the palace, Princess Lotus, had been invited to take a look at him. The prescription she had prescribed had no effect at all, and his body was getting more and more swollen, covered in rashes. Several doctors even said that he had a venereal disease and that he didn't have many days to live. He had no choice but to come to Mo Qingfeng. He had to wait. Even if he didn't have the patience. "Stay calm." Oh Yangxian looked at Oh Yangting, amused. His tone was sinister, and there was even a hint of mockery in it. "Big brother, when did your temper become so good? If it was in the past, you would have already caused trouble. But now, you are patiently waiting for that woman who doesn't know what's good for her. Or is it because his limbs are swollen and he can't move freely? Even his brain can't function properly. Young Master Mengxian, are you adding insult to injury or gloating?" The youth in purple looked at Oh Yangxian coldly. He was one of Oh Yangting's people and naturally could not accept others humiliating his young master like this. "Who do you think you are?" Oh Yangshuan's handsome face suddenly twisted. He angrily glared at the purple-clothed youth. You're just a dog. What right do you have to talk to me? The purple-clothed youth's face turned ugly. Just as he was about to curse, Yangting suddenly said in a low voice, Dong, shut up. The purple-clothed youth called Dong had no choice but to shut his mouth. He glared at Yangxian viciously. Yangxian did not take him seriously. Instead, he looked at Yangting and said, Big brother, it's not that I want to criticize you, but look at how you teach your subordinates. Little brother Xian, Dong and Nan are very good. They don't need to be taught. Yangting took a deep breath. He looked like he was in pain. He said weakly, all of you, shut up. Let me be alone. Now, all the strength in his body seemed to have been sucked away. It was difficult for him to even breathe, let alone speak. If it was in the past, how could he stand Yangshuan's attitude? Now, he did not ask for anything. He only wanted his body to recover quickly. To be honest, he now regretted entering a place like Huaman Tower. If it were not for those prostitutes, how could he have contracted venereal disease? Humph. What a good-for-nothing. Yangxian flicked his sleeves and coldly glanced at Dong and Nan. The words useless things that he was scolding were either Yangting or Dong and Nan. Dong and Nan looked at each other and pursed their lips tightly. They suppressed the anger in their hearts. At this time, a beautiful figure wearing a veil walked out from inside. When he first saw her, Yangting's eyes lit up. She was Mo Qingfeng from now on. When she walked over, disappointment flashed through Yangting's eyes. The person who came was not the person he was looking for. Young Master I'm very sorry. Miss Mo said that today's consultation time is over and she will not be accepting patients. If young Master wants to see a doctor, please come to Qianji Hall tomorrow and wait in line. Fu Yanxia came in front of Yangting and spoke very politely. Her voice was as sweet as honey and as soft as the breeze. Ungrateful woman, how dare you put on airs in front of me? Before Yangting could speak, Yangxian lost his temper and kicked the door of Qianji Hall. With a bang, Dong and Nan, who were standing at the side, felt the ground shake. What is Qianji Hall? What is Mo Qingfeng? How dare you not put me in your eyes? Facing Yangshuan's anger, Fu Yanxia kept silent and quietly took a few steps back. The other people in Kuqing Tower ignored his angry roar. Nailan Jinyu even sat down in front of the tea table indulgently and elegantly poured tea. He glanced over with a smile that was not a smile. What are you still standing here for? Hurry up and call that woman Mo Qingfeng out for me. Yangxian saw that Fu Yanxia had no intention of informing him and could not help but vent his anger on her. In the entire hall, other than Nailan Jinyu and the Lark, everyone else had tacitly entered the pharmacy after he lost his temper. Nailan Jinyu had an oppressive force that could intimidate one's soul. Even with an elegant smile, it was like a gentle yet cold sharp sword that could take a person's life at any time. No matter how arrogant Yangxian was, he would not provoke Nailan Jinyu on his own accord when there were people to choose from, even though he hated him very much in his heart. Fu Yanxia pursed her lips and turned to leave. However, she did not ask Mo Qingfeng to come out. Was Miss Mo someone a mere Yangxian could meet whenever he wanted? Yangxian lay on the bamboo chair disappointedly. Being rejected by Mo Qingfeng, he choked and felt sour in his heart. He, who had been domineering all his life, had actually fallen to the point where he was rejected by a woman today. After about half a quarter of an hour, not only did he not see Mo Qingfeng come out, but he also did not see a single servant. Yangshuan's anger grew even greater. He suddenly rushed in front of Nailan Jinyu and glared at him. Call that woman Mo Qingfeng out. If she doesn't want to be a coward, then come out immediately. Nailan Jinyu only glanced at him with a smile that was not a smile. He was half leaning against the back of the chair in a somewhat lazy posture. His black hair hung on both sides of his chest, appearing extremely quiet. A trace of coldness burst forth from his indifferent eyes. His slender fingers gently grasped the teacup elegantly. He took a sip of tea and put down the teacup. Then, he leaned his head back and closed his eyes to rest. Seeing this, Yangxian was so angry that he gritted his teeth. The hands in his sleeves clenched tightly, but the anger in his heart seemed to have nowhere to vent. Nailan Jinyu's lazy expression made him even angrier. The lark gently fanned him with the feather fan, allowing Yangxian to throw a tantrum here. Nailan Jinyu was already very merciful for not kicking him out. Young man, don't be so angry. Being petty hurts the spleen and liver. At this time, Mo Qingfeng slowly walked out from the side hall. Dressed in green, she was cold, noble, and indifferent. Her appearance was stunning, and her style was unparalleled. Hearing her voice, Nailan Jinyu slowly opened his eyes. A faint smile hung on his handsome face. He looked at her with interest, a trace of emotion hidden in the depths of his gentle eyes. When Yangxian heard this voice, he forgot about the pain in his swollen body. He suddenly sat up straight from the bamboo chair and looked at Mo Qingfeng in surprise. Her appearance was like the rising sun, extremely dazzling. He believed that she would definitely come out to deal with him. Even if she did not treat him, he would wait here. She would definitely come out. No one understood a woman's heart better than him. Yangxian had never seen such a cold and stunning woman. His angry and twisted handsome face was stunned the moment he saw Mo Qingfeng. He stared blankly at the woman who was walking over. She was the legendary Mo Qingfeng. Heavens, what a devastatingly beautiful woman. You're that Mo Qingfeng who doesn't know what's good for her. After recovering from his shock, Yangxian looked at Mo Qingfeng darkly. He was not like Yangting, who was stunned when he saw a beautiful woman. Facing the awe-inspiring Mo Qingfeng, he only had to put on a more arrogant posture to not feel that he had lost in front of this woman. Actually, Mo Qingfeng could defeat him with one finger. It depended on whether he had the qualifications to compete with her, and whether she wanted to compete with him. Mo Qingfeng's eyes were cold as she glanced at Yangxian indifferently. Please watch your words in front of me. Then she walked over to Yangting and stood beside the bamboo chair. She looked down at the person on the chair and frowned slightly. How did he become so ugly? Miss Mo, hurry and save me. Yangting lost all his arrogance in front of her. His flirtatious and arrogant personality had all disappeared. No matter how powerful a person was, in the face of death, they still had to bow down. Not to mention someone like Yangting who was afraid of death. Mo Qingfeng pursed her lips. No wonder Fu Yanxia did not recognize him. If he did not speak, she would not have recognized him just by looking at his swollen face. His skin was red and swollen, revealing scratches. The scratches were still bleeding and there were even blisters in some places. It was really a strange illness. Now is not the time for treatment. Yangting, come back tomorrow, Mo Qingfeng said coldly. His illness could not be cured in a day or two. Is there a secret medicine that can quickly stop the itch? Yangting asked anxiously, his hand scratching his neck. Mo Qingfeng frowned, her beautiful face incomparably cold. If you keep scratching like this, you'll only die. When Yangting heard this, he immediately stopped scratching and looked anxiously at Mo Qingfeng. He begged, it's so itchy that I can't stand it. I can't sleep at night. Please do me a favor and give me a pill that stops the itch. Chapter 1523. You're beyond cure. Even immortal pills can't stop your itch. When Yuding heard this, a wave of fear rushed from his toes to his head. It was as if he saw the black and white impermanence coming to take his life. His face grew paler, and even Dong and Nan's expressions were extremely heavy. Beyond cure. Yuding was so scared that his whole body trembled. His ears were buzzing, and there was a strange sound. In just a few days, he was beyond cure. Even immortal pills couldn't cure him. Yushuan didn't seem sad because Yuding was beyond cure. Instead, a strange look flashed through his gloomy eyes. A hedonistic young master like Yuding, who only knew how to flirt in Huaman Lu, was simply a kind of scum. His death wasn't to be regretted. Miss Mo, you must save me. Yuding reached out his hand in panic. Mo Qingfeng took half a step back to avoid him grabbing her sleeve. Come back tomorrow. Mo Qingfeng only glanced at him once and said coldly. Then, she turned and left. Suddenly, her eyes turned cold, and she felt danger coming from behind. She didn't even need to do anything. Nailan Jinyu, who had been sitting in front of the table, waved her sleeve and blocked the sudden white light. The white light backfired, and Yangxian was knocked back a few steps before he could steady himself. He clutched his aching chest and looked at Mo Qingfeng with a sinister gaze. You want to leave when I didn't tell you to. What do you take me for? He was the young master of the O Mansion. Who in the imperial capital dared to look down on the people of the O Mansion? Even the emperor had to be respectful when he saw his grandfather. What was a mere Mo Qingfeng to him? Mo Qingfeng turned around and looked coldly at Yangxian. Her voice was like a 1,000-year-old glacier, so cold that it could drip water. But Clear Tower is this lady's territory. You dare to cause trouble in this lady's territory. I think you're tired of living. Suddenly, a red sword appeared in Yushuan's hand. Who's tired of living? I'll show you who's tired of living today. For the arrogant and overbearing Yushuan, not to mention Kuqing Lu, the entire imperial capital was his territory. In his territory, he could do whatever he wanted. It wasn't up to a woman to say anything. Brother Xian, stop. Seeing Yangxian thrust his sword at Mo Qingfeng, Yangting's expression changed drastically. He ignored the pain in his body and shouted at the figure. How could Yangxian listen to him? At this moment, his entire body was emitting killing intent. His gaze was dark and frightening. If he didn't kill Mo Qingfeng, he wasn't human. Nailan Jinyu wanted to make a move, but Mo Qingfeng stopped her with a look. Nailan Jinyu nimbly dodged the sword that was aimed at her head, and a strange cold smile appeared on her beautiful face. It seems that you people from the O residence like to seek your own deaths. Since he wanted to die, he would fulfill his wish. You still dare to dodge. Seeing that his sword had missed its target, Yangxian attacked again. His sword was an ancient spiritual sword, and it was extremely powerful. Even if the sword did not hit its target would still be able to feel its power and would be suppressed by its power. Pang! Just when Yangxian was 2 meters away from Mo Qingfeng waved her left arm. Yangxian, who was swinging his sword, suddenly stopped. His entire body froze, and his eyes widened. It was as if time had stopped, and his heart had stopped beating. He lowered his head and stared blankly at a thin silver line in front of him. The silver line emitted a fatal cold light and pierced his throat. His throat felt numb and painful, and he couldn't even speak. Brother Xian. An ominous premonition emerged in his heart. Yangting stared blankly at Yangxian, who was standing there stiffly. Clang! The red sword in Yangshuan's hand fell to the ground with a muffled sound. Mo Qingfeng's eyes were cold. She retracted her arm, and Oh Youngxuan's throat was like a fountain. Blood spurted out. With a bang, his entire body fell backward. His mouth was slightly open, and his eyes were wide open. He looked like he had died with a grievance. Ah Dong and Ah Nan were slightly shocked. They silently looked at Oh Yongxian, who had fallen to the ground, and did not go forward to care for him. You killed him. After a long time, Oh Yangting finally regained his senses. He raised his head and looked at Mo Qingfeng in shock. Mo Qingfeng snorted coldly. If I don't kill him, am I supposed to wait for him to kill me? Was she the kind of trash who didn't fight back when she was hit or scolded? Oh Yangting instantly deflated like a balloon and collapsed on the bamboo chair. His brother, Oh Yangxian, had died in front of him just like that. It wasn't easy for a person to live, but it was so easy to die. Lark, throw his body back to the O Manor. Tell O Chiotian that if his people come to cause trouble in the future, he can kill them once. Yes, Miss Mo. Lark deftly lifted O Yangshuan's body and quickly disappeared. Mo Qingfeng looked at O Yangting and sneered. Why aren't you going back? In the future, please come to Thousandji Hall before the hour of 5 to see a doctor. O Yangting looked at Mo Qingfeng with a complicated expression. He knew that she was going too far, but there was nothing he could do. He couldn't even hate her when he saw her kill his own brother. I'm already beyond cure. Can you save me? Whether or not I can save you doesn't depend on the severity of your illness. It depends on my mood, Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Her expression was arrogant, but what she said was the truth. She had the right to be arrogant. In the O Manor, O Chiotian and his wife, as well as the other elders of the O Manor, were all sitting in the side chamber. In the center of the side chamber lay O Yangshuan's body, which had been sent back by Lark. Their grief was accompanied by a burning anger. For hundreds of years, no one had ever dared to be so arrogant and kill a member of the O clan. They hated Mo Qingfeng to the core and wanted nothing more than to kill her immediately. However, they were very clear about their own strength. It wasn't easy to kill Mo Qingfeng. She had Ku Qinglu backing her up. Even Nailan Jinyu, who was by her side, was difficult to deal with, let alone her. Are we going to swallow this like sick cats? Oh Yangshuan's birth mother, Yang Jiying, said sorrowfully. The one who had died was her son. She couldn't swallow this no matter what. This old man has already told you not to go to Ku Qinglu for no reason, but you didn't listen. Oh Chiotian said angrily. Although he was sorrowful, if O Yangxian hadn't gone to Ku Qinglu to provoke that woman, he wouldn't have lost his life. After returning from Ku Qinglu, he had already warned them not to go to Ku Qinglu for no reason, but they didn't listen. Now that something had happened, was it useful to blame others? Little Xian went to Ku Qinglu to find her for treatment. Is that wrong? The Thousandji Hall opened its doors to treat people. How can it open a clinic to kill people? Yang Jiying said angrily. A trace of viciousness flashed through her beautiful eyes. Was that ugly freak Mo Qingfeng really that powerful? Even the master had to show her some respect. The more he gave her face, the more arrogant she became. Master, it's just Mo Qingfeng. Why don't you let us settle the score with her? Are we not going to avenge little Xian? As she spoke, Yang Jiying fell to her knees beside O Yangxian. She hugged his stiff and cold body and cried bitterly, Little Xian, you died so miserably. Mother will definitely seek justice for you. I won't let that woman have an easy time. Aya, why is your life so bitter? Nailan Jinyu, who was sitting on the branch of the towering tree in the O residence's courtyard, saw everything that happened in the side chamber. When he saw Yang Jiying hugging O Yangshuan's body and crying bitterly, he couldn't help but laugh. How did O Yangxian die miserably? The way he died, taking his life in one move. He didn't even feel any pain before he breathed his last. Wasn't this a happy way to die? Moreover, which member of the O clan had a bitter life? They were arrogant, domineering, and domineering. They could do whatever they wanted in the imperial capital. The common people hated them to the bone. How could such a hedonistic young master have a bitter life? Then wouldn't the common people's lives be even more bitter? Settle the score. That's easy for you to say. What right do you have to settle the score? Oh Qiutian looked sternly at Yang Jiying. Little Xian and Ting went to 1000G Hall together. Why is Ting fine? Why did something happen to little Xian? Isn't it because of little Xian's temper? Oh Qiutian knew the temperament of his children and grandchildren better than anyone else. Their arrogance and condescension were all because they were spoiled. Especially Oh Yangxian. He was impulsive and had a bad temper. If he could control his temper, he wouldn't have lost his life. Father, the O clan is being stepped on by a woman. Don't tell me you don't care. Oh Yangshuan's father, Oh Xiaoyun, asked unwillingly. If someone dared to bully the O clan in the past, Oh Qiutian would be the first to stand up and bully them back. That Mo Qingfeng was only the 7th young miss of the Mo residence. Why should the O clan fear an ugly woman? Oh Qiutian's turbid and sharp eyes quickly flashed with malice and viciousness. Of course we have to care, but now is not the time. When is the time? Ting was rejected when he went to 1000G Hall to seek medical treatment, and little Xian. When he mentioned AI, Oh Xiaoyun glanced sadly at Oh Yangshuan's corpse. His heart was filled with hatred and anger. Big brother, that Mo Qingfeng is too arrogant. She doesn't put the O clan in her eyes at all. Today, she killed little Xian. Who knows who she'll kill tomorrow? If we choose not to resist, she'll be even more arrogant and think that our O clan is easy to bully. In this old man's opinion, we should at least teach her a lesson. Oh Qiutian's younger brother, Oh Qiutian, said angrily. Everyone, please calm down. Mo Qingfeng killed little Xian. This old man is also very angry. This old man can't swallow this anger. This woman must die. Otherwise, sooner or later, she'll climb over the O clan's head. However, the O clan won't kill her. We'll use the hands of others to kill her. Oh Qiutian said with a sinister calculation in his eyes. If the O clan moved out to fight her, there would definitely be casualties. He wanted to use the hands of others to eliminate this witch. Master, do you have a way? Yang Jiying's crying stopped abruptly when she heard this. She looked at Oh Qiutian with anticipation. Oh Qiutian tightly pursed his lips and glanced indifferently at Yang Jiying. He didn't tell her the method he was thinking of. A woman's benevolence would only ruin things. Nalan Jinyu, who was sitting on a tree branch, had a faint smile on his handsome face. His phoenix eyes were filled with deep rumination. His green robes were like jade and his black hair fluttered in the wind. He leaned against the tree branch with an indescribable elegance and charm. Using the hands of others to kill her. The smile in Nalan Jinyu's eyes deepened. Oh Qiutian, did he have the ability to do that? Chapter 1524. In the pavilion and the courtyard of Qingxin Pavilion. After listening to Nalan Jinyu's story, Mo Qingfeng only smiled coldly. Her eyes were indifferent and didn't show much emotion. Don't you look forward to how Oh Qiao Tian will use others to get rid of you? Nalan Jinyu smiled at Mo Qingfeng. His voice was gentle and his eyes were gentle. The fingers holding the teacup were as white as jade. Dressed in green, he was graceful and elegant. No one could compare to him. Mo Qingfeng looked at him indifferently. Seeing the smile in his eyes, Nan's devilishly handsome face suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. He was slightly startled and frowned. Why did he think of Nan again? Mo Qingfeng retracted her gaze and looked at the teacup in her hand. Her beautiful lips curled into a mocking smile. Cheap tricks. Not worth my expectations. She was someone who had already died once. Facing death, she wasn't afraid at all. However, others couldn't kill her as they pleased. She would kill whoever came. Miss Mo, I feel a lot of pressure when I'm with you. Nalan Jinyu smiled. His gentle eyes flashed with admiration. Mo Qingfeng raised her eyebrows. Pressure. I let you manage Kuching Pavilion freely. I never interfere with the organization's matters. Hee hee. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how your strength far surpasses mine. Really? You're just hiding your strength. Mo Qingfeng said indifferently. She just came to this world where strength was respected. She didn't have any cultivation. The martial arts she had were brought over from her previous life. And Nalan Jinyu's cultivation was higher than hers. How could her strength surpass his? The two chatted while drinking tea. Mo Qingfeng found that Nalan Jinyu was a very talkative man. Sometimes he was very humorous, sometimes he was very cold. He was a very complicated and trustworthy man. That was why she was so assured to let him manage Kuching Pavilion. It's late. Go back to your room and rest early. I think tomorrow will be even busier. Mo Qingfeng looked deeply at Nalan Jinyu and said. Although he still wanted to spend more time with her, when he saw the faint tiredness on her beautiful face, Nalan Jinyu didn't want to stay any longer. He knew how tired she was. These days, she had been busy with the opening of the 1000G hole. She had been bitterly refining pills and was already very tired. She still had to treat so many people. Now, her face was a little pale, and Nalan Jinyu felt a little heartache. After Nalan Jinyu left, Mo Qingfeng got up and was about to return to her room. Just as she moved, she felt a sharp pain in her chest. Her limbs trembled, and she held onto the stone table with both hands to prevent herself from falling down. She slowly sat back in her original position with one hand on the table and the other hand on her chest. Her brows were tightly knitted, and her expression was pained. Her beautiful face was as pale as paper, and cold sweat was oozing out of every pore on her body. Drops of sweat dripped down her forehead. It was as if an invisible hand was squeezing her heart. This unprecedented pain made her tremble all over. How could this be? This sudden sharp pain seemed to come every 2 days, and it was irregular. Every night, his chest would feel stuffy, and it would be difficult to breathe. When the pain came, his meridians would feel as if they were being burned, and it was incomparably painful. The current her was very skilled in medicine. She, who was skilled in medicine, didn't diagnose that she had a heart attack, and this wasn't a sign of a heart attack. Every time she cultivated, there was a strange qi in her body that rushed to her meridians. Her dantian was also sealed by this strange qi, making her unable to operate. This strange qi was like a naughty child. Every time she cultivated, it would come out to disturb her. Every night when she lay on the bed to rest, it would press on her chest, and every few days, it would squeeze her heart, making her feel unbearable pain. Was this a sign of cultivation going berserk? She cultivated under Zinan's guidance, and Zinan wouldn't harm her. But where did this strange qi in her body come from? Mo Qingfeng couldn't figure it out. She could only endure the pain and wait for it to gradually disappear. She had taken immortal pills and painkillers before, but they didn't have any effect. She was very sure that it wasn't because her body was sick, but because of improper cultivation that caused this strange qi in her body. Recently, she hadn't cultivated. She didn't want to be tortured to death by this strange chi before she could improve herself. It was really painful. It was so painful that she didn't even have the strength to sit. She wanted to enter the space, but her consciousness wasn't clear, so she couldn't activate her will. She was still very weak now. In her current situation, she couldn't activate her will and enter the space. Miss Mo, you don't look well. Are you okay? Fu Yanxia came to the pavilion with the bird's nest porridge. Seeing that Mo Qingfeng's expression wasn't right and was extremely painful, she couldn't help but ask nervously. Nailan Jinyu went straight to her after leaving Qingxin Pavilion and asked her to make some light and nutritious meals for Mo Qingfeng. These days, she was too tired from refining pills, so her complexion wasn't good. The bird's nest porridge and ginseng soup were excellent supplements. When the bird's nest porridge was ready, Fu Yanxia brought it over. The ginseng soup was still simmering. Mo Qingfeng raised her head. Her vision was a little blurry. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be covered with a thin layer of white mist, hazy and beautiful. This kind of beauty was sickly and made people's hearts ache. It was the first time Fu Yanxia saw Mo Qingfeng like this. Usually, when she saw her, she was awe-inspiring, noble, and peerless. Seeing her in pain now, Fu Yanxia's heart also ached. She hoped that Mo Qingfeng would always be safe and healthy. This way, she could always be by her side. In the past, she always felt that life was boring. Ever since she followed Mo Qingfeng, she felt that life was so wonderful and life was so precious. It was Mo Qingfeng who saved her from the O Manor. It was Mo Qingfeng who gave her a second chance. She saw Mo Qingfeng as her savior and God. She supported her, her eyes full of worry and nervousness. She said with concern, "Miss Mo, I'll help you back to the room to lie down." Mo Qingfeng didn't refuse. In fact, lying down would be more comfortable. If it wasn't for the pain and the weakness in her limbs, she would have already gone back to the room. Fu Yanxia supported her. She felt that her whole body was trembling, her limbs were weak, and it was difficult for her to walk. Her heart ached. "Miss Mo, I'll carry you back. It'll be faster this way." Mo Qingfeng frowned deeply and looked at Fu Yanxia's back. She smiled bitterly in her heart. There would be a day when she would be carried by someone. Fu Yanxia carried Mo Qingfeng back to the room. Mo Qingfeng laid on the bed. Her chest was stuffy. She would only lean against the bed to half sit and half lie down. This was more comfortable. "Miss Mo, have some porridge." Fu Yanxia quickly went to the pavilion and brought the bowl of bird's nest porridge over. She squatted down in front of the bed and wanted to feed Mo Qingfeng. "Put it aside. I don't have an appetite now." Fu Yanxia's face was heavy. She looked at Mo Qingfeng worriedly. "Miss Mo, are you sick?" "I'm fine. I overdid my cultivation." Mo Qingfeng's thin lips moved slightly and looked at Fu Yanxia deeply. "I want to lie down quietly for a while. You can leave." Chapter 1525. I'll stay outside and not make a sound. "Miss Mo, call me if you need anything," Fu Yanxia said and then turned to leave. Just as she took 2 steps, Mo Qingfeng called her, "Have you prepared the herbal water I asked you to prepare?" Fu Yanxia turned around, "It's all ready. According to your instructions, the herbs have been put into the pot and simmered. Simmer it on a small fire. Stop at 3 in the morning and pour the water out of the bathtub." Mo Qingfeng took out a white porcelain vase from her waist, pour the water from the pot into the bathtub for half an hour. "Pour this bottle of powder in and mix it well." "Yes." Fu Yanxia walked over and took the medicine bottle. She stared deeply at Mo Qingfeng and said, "Miss Mo, rest assured. Yanxia will do what you asked." Mo Qingfeng softly replied. She was more assured with Fu Yanxia's work than leaving it to the lark. She leaned against the bed and closed her eyes. She endured the burning of her meridians and waited for the pain to disappear. Fu Yanxia looked at her with distress for a moment. Then she quietly retreated, no longer disturbing her rest. The next day, when Thousand-Ji Hall opened for business, the hall was full of people. In order to be able to see Mo Qingfeng for free, many people came to wait at 3 in the morning. After being seen by Mo Qingfeng yesterday, everyone's condition improved significantly. Mo Qingfeng's good reputation for medical skills spread like the wind in the capital. There were more people coming to see the doctor than yesterday. Many cultivators came to the pill trading hall to buy pills that could help improve their cultivation. Thousand-Ji Hall was bustling with people. Not only people from Chu Qiangua, but also cultivators from neighboring countries came to buy pills. Mo Qingfeng's reputation was like a gust of wind, spreading farther and farther. Overnight, almost everyone in the Rosen continent knew the name Mo Qingfeng. Therefore, the number of people coming to Thousand-Ji Hall today was twice as much as yesterday. The entrance of Thousand-Ji Hall was full of guests from all walks of life. Mo Qingfeng still saw the first 30 patients. Those who hadn't had their turn yet were waiting outside. There were a few who came to see the doctor yesterday. After taking the medicine, their spirits were very refreshed. They sat together and praised Mo Qingfeng's medical skills. The front yard was as lively as a market. At this time, the lark hurried over, looking a little flustered, and directly entered Mo Qingfeng's consultation room. In the consultation room, other than one patient, only Mo Qingfeng and Fu Yanxia were there. "Miss Mo." The lark looked anxious. Seeing that there was a sick person, she wanted to say something but hesitated. Anyone who saw her would know that something had happened. Mo Qingfeng raised his eyes and looked at the lark indifferently. "What is it? Speak. There are many people in the front hall. They are clamoring to see you. They even brought in 10 corpses. They are all people who took the soul concentrating pill." Mo Qingfeng was shocked when he heard this. His eyes turned cold as he looked at the lark. "Are you sure it's the person who took the soul concentrating pill?" Fu Yanxia, who was sitting at the side, was also shocked. Even the patient's face began to become flustered. The 10 people who had taken the pill had all taken it. The lark nodded timidly, feeling extremely uneasy. The front hall was already in an uproar. If it wasn't for Nailan Jinyu and the other assassins in Kuching Lu suppressing them, they would have already torn down Thousand-Ji Hall. "Let them make a fuss first," Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a touch of malice. She was fine after taking the soul concentrating pill. Why did they die when it was their turn to take it? They were obviously here to make trouble. Since they wanted to make a fuss, she would let them make a fuss. After the lark left, Mo Qingfeng continued to write prescriptions for the patients. "Miss Mo, is this medicine okay?" The patient took the prescription and looked at Mo Qingfeng worriedly. He was calm. If it was someone else, he would have already run away. How would he dare to take her prescription? Mo Qingfeng's face turned cold. Her whole body exuded a shocking aura. She looked at the patient coldly. "You don't have to get the medicine. Take this prescription to other clinics and see if it can kill people." The patient heard this and didn't say anything. He left silently. "Miss Mo, do you still want to continue to treat them?" Fu Yanxia looked at Mo Qingfeng with a complicated expression. Her face today was paler than yesterday. She looked haggard, but it didn't affect her beauty. Mo Qingfeng looked at Fu Yanxia deeply. Why don't you continue? Fu Yanxia got up and walked to the door. She shouted towards the front yard, next. She actually refined a pill that can kill people? God, it's too scary. I don't want to see them anymore. Who knows if the medicine will kill people? Let's go to the front hall to see what's going on. Seriously, if you want to see a doctor, you should be cured. Who wants to see a dead person? But Qing Lu is an assassin organization. They opened a clinic to borrow medicine to kill people. What are we waiting for? Let's go. As soon as the patient who had just finished seeing the patient came out, he told them the shocking news. After hearing it, they were all shocked and talked about it. When Fu Yanxia called for the next patient, they all left the front yard as if they were running for their lives. The front yard, which was as lively as a vegetable market just now, was empty in an instant. Looking at their backs that ran faster than rabbits, Fu Yanxia shook her head helplessly. She thought that Miss Mo would be tired again. Miss Mo, they are all gone. Back in the consultation room, Fu Yanxia looked at Mo Qingfeng faintly. Mo Qingfeng stretched her waist and said with a relaxed smile, "It's good that they are gone. I don't need to be so tired." Fu Yanxia didn't think so. She was afraid that after these people left, the news of people dying from eating pills would quickly spread in the Rosen continent. Her reputation would be ruined. After leaving the consultation room, Mo Qingfeng didn't immediately go to the front hall of Qianji Hall. Instead, she returned to Qingxin Pavilion. "Yanxia, prepare a bowl of rice porridge and some pastries for me." "Yes, Yanxia will prepare it." Fu Yanxia had just left when the lark hurried over again. "Miss Mo, Yuting is in the front hall, and Chu Mukin is also here. They want to see you." Mo Qingfeng frowned. "Chu Mukin is here. What did he come here for? Did he want to see her make a fool of herself? The family members of the deceased are here. They are here, and they are making a lot of noise. They want to see you," the lark said. Mo Qingfeng glanced at the lark. "You go and bring Yuting in." "What about Chu Mukin? If he can wait, then let him wait. If he can't wait, then let him go." Chu Mukin wanted to see her, but she didn't want to see him. Yuting was still sitting on yesterday's bamboo chair, which was carried in by Dong and Nan. Mo Qingfeng was eating rice porridge and pastries. When Yuting arrived, she just faintly glanced at him and told Fu Yanxia to make a pot of honeysuckle tea for Yuting. Dong and Nan looked at her silently. They were thinking that after the death in the front hall, she could still leisurely eat pastries here. Her calmness made Yuting anxious. Today, his entire body was even more swollen than yesterday. His originally tall and slender body was now almost like a round bead. That handsome face was so swollen that it didn't look human anymore. Those two beautiful lips were like two cooked sausages. Mo Qingfeng looked deeply at him, and a smile appeared in her beautiful eyes. Yuting had been watching her since he came in. He saw her every frown and smile. It wasn't because she had a beautiful face, but because she had a magical power that attracted people's eyes. For a dandy young master like him, when his eyes fell on her, it was as if he was possessed and couldn't look away. Yuting also saw the smile that gradually appeared in her cold eyes. Her beautiful eyes were smiling, and she was as charming as a flower. "Miss Mo, I'm terminally ill. How can you still smile?" Yuting didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When he wasn't sick or in pain, why didn't she smile at him? Wasn't she gloating over his misfortune? Perhaps it was because Yuting's swollen appearance was cute. Seeing him, Mo Qingfeng couldn't help but want to laugh. "You're the one who's terminally ill, not me. Why can't I smile?" Mo Qingfeng looked at him with a smile. His eyes were so swollen that they narrowed into a thin line, and then his eye bags drooped. Mo Qingfeng thought of a pet dog. That's right, the current Yuding was as cute as a pet dog. You let me in to treat me. Can I still be saved? Yuding looked at her, and a glimmer of hope floated in his heart. Mo Qingfeng leisurely tasted the fragrant tea brewed in the spiritual spring. The tea leaves were brought back by Nailan Jinyu from Tanchuan country. The fragrance was strong and lingered in her mouth. You came in from the front hall, so you should have seen the 10 corpses. You still dare to ask me to treat your illness? Mo Qingfeng looked at Yuding with a smile and asked with some deep meaning. The patients who were free of charge had escaped, and the patients who were charged still dared to send themselves to the door. Yuding was stunned. When he saw the row of corpses lying in Qianji Hall, he did consider leaving. But when he thought of Chu Qian country, which doctor hadn't he looked for? In the end, didn't he return with disappointment? Now, he had to treat a dead horse. If he could, he could. If he couldn't, he would go back home and wait for death. His illness was the price of being dissolute. Anyway, I'm terminally ill. If you want me to die, you don't have to treat me. Let me in. I believe you have a way to treat me. As for those corpses, I always feel that something is wrong. Yuding said faintly. Would someone open a medical center and kill people in such a high-profile way? Wasn't this shooting oneself in the foot? Mo Qingfeng was a shrewd woman. If she wanted to kill people, would she need to use such methods? Besides, those who took the soul-consolidating pill were low-level cultivators. Some of them were ordinary people. She didn't have any grudges with them before, so they weren't a threat to her. Yuding was sure that those people didn't die from taking the soul-consolidating pill. Someone wanted to frame her. Mo Qingfeng smiled faintly and looked at Fu Yanxia. She said, "Give him the honeysuckle tea. Drink the whole pot." Yes, Miss Mo. Fu Yanxia brought the honeysuckle tea over. She handed the teapot to Ah Dong and the teacup to Ah Nan. You all heard what Miss Mo said, right? Feed this pot of tea to your young master. He has to drink it all. Ah Dong held the teapot and looked at the veiled Fu Yanxia with suspicion. Honeysuckle tea can cure my young master's illness. Fu Yanxia glared and asked unhappily, "Are you doubting my young master's medical skills?" Chapter 1526. Ah Dong, I asked you to feed me. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you not want to follow me anymore? Yuding's eyes darkened as he shouted sternly. Mo Qingfeng looked at them with interest. Yuding was a playboy, but he had 2 subordinates who were loyal to him. Was this his good fortune from his previous life? After drinking the full pot of honeysuckle tea, Yuding's pores were expanding. His body was hot, and his sweat was dripping with blood. He felt like thousands of ants were biting his body. It was painful and itchy. His hands began to scratch crazily. If you don't want your skin to rot, you better stop scratching. Mo Qingfeng looked at him and said faintly, "The more you scratch, the more itchy it will be." It wasn't that uncomfortable before, but after drinking the honeysuckle tea, it's extremely itchy. What's going on? Yuding couldn't stop scratching the itch at all. It was so uncomfortable. How could he stop scratching the itch so easily? Yanxia, take him to bathe. Mo Qingfeng glanced at Fu Yanxia and then looked at Yuding. Your body will be hot and itchy when you bathe. You must resist scratching. If you do, the treatment will be in vain. How could he resist the itch if he didn't scratch it? How about you knock me out and then let me bathe? He wouldn't be able to control himself if he was awake. Mo Qingfeng frowned when she heard this. Her eyes flashed. This seemed to be a good idea. He got up and moved like the wind behind Ouyangting. His hand rose and fell, his movements extremely nimble and fast. Before Adong and Nan could react, their young master had already fainted, lying limply on the bamboo chair. Take him to bathe. Mo Qingfeng glanced at Adong and Nan coldly. Adong and Nan came back to their senses and immediately lifted the chair. Under Fu Yinche's lead, they took Ouyangting to bathe. As they left, Mo Qingfeng's eyes suddenly became cold. Her beautiful face was also indifferent. After arranging Ouyangting, it was time to go to the front hall to watch the show. In the front hall of Thousand-Ji Hall, the pill trade stopped. The people who were collecting medicine didn't dare to do so. They were all chased out by Nailan Jinyu. At this time, the entrance of Thousand-Ji Hall was blocked by a sea of people. Call Mo Qingfeng out. Now that someone has died, has she become a coward? My man has no enmity with you, so why did you kill him? Mo Qingfeng, you vicious woman, give me back my man's life. The family members of the 10 corpses had already surrounded the entrance of Qinji Hall, clamoring to see Mo Qingfeng. The scene was chaotic. They wanted to barge into Kuching Restaurant, but they were stopped by Kuching Restaurant's people. There was even a fight. A few young men were injured and were sitting on the ground crying out. You're right. They have no enmity with me, so why would I kill them? Suddenly, a voice filled with power and coldness rang out. This voice seemed to have a magical power that instantly made everyone quiet down. It was as if time had stopped. Everyone's gaze turned towards the direction of the voice. Mo Qingfeng, who was wearing a sky-blue dress, slowly walked out. Her eyes were cold, and her aura was awe-inspiring. She gave off a gloomy aura, as if she had just come out of hell. An oppressive aura condensed in the air, making it hard for people to even breathe. The family members of the 10 corpses added up to about 100 people. One of the middle-aged women was the first to come back to her senses. She rushed towards Mo Qingfeng like a madwoman. Her face was ferocious, and her eyes were vicious. It was as if she wanted to eat Mo Qingfeng. You vicious woman, I want to avenge my husband. Slap. Before the woman could reach Mo Qingfeng, she was slapped away by Mo Qingfeng's palm chi and landed on her husband's body. Look at this, this vicious woman even wants to kill me. The woman pointed at Mo Qingfeng and shouted. Her eyes were filled with hatred. After shouting, she laid on the corpse and cried, Husband, you died so tragically. Mo Qingfeng, my son died after taking the soul concentrating pill you made. No matter what, you have to give us an explanation today. An old woman who looked to be in her 80s but was still very strong shouted at Mo Qingfeng while holding her son's body. That's right. If you didn't give them the soul concentrating pill, they wouldn't have died. You have to give us an explanation today. Otherwise, we will guard the entrance of Thousand-Ji Hall and won't leave even if we die. The family members of the deceased were all very emotional. If they didn't see the woman being slapped away by Mo Qingfeng, they would have rushed up and beat her up like she did. They knew they couldn't beat her, but her pills could kill people. They couldn't beat her, right? Mo Qingfeng walked in front of them and looked coldly at the row of corpses. They weren't covered with a white cloth. Mo Qingfeng carefully scanned them one by one. Their faces were normal. If they were poisoned to death, their faces would have changed or turned purple. Their faces were normal, and their lips were normal. She, who had been a doctor for many years, could tell at a glance that they weren't poisoned to death. She walked slowly along the 10 corpses and carefully looked at them from head to toe. The parts that were exposed didn't show any signs of injury. Their expressions didn't show any signs of pain or struggle. They didn't show any signs of panic. It was as if they were sleeping peacefully. It didn't look like they were poisoned to death, nor did they look like they were injured to death. The person who killed them must be an expert. Mo Qingfeng knelt down beside a younger corpse. She lifted his arm and rolled up his sleeves, revealing a patch of clean skin. There weren't any scratches at all. His fingertips were clean, and there were ink stains on his fingernails. She looked at the family members sitting beside the corpse. He's a scholar. The brother of the deceased looked angrily at Mo Qingfeng. My brother was going to be the top scholar. He loved to write when he was alive. He was the glory of our family. You vicious woman, you destroyed our family's only hope. Mo Qingfeng stood up and coldly looked at the family members of the deceased. They're all in Kuching building. I'll give you an answer in 3 days. You want to destroy the corpses? A family member heard and jumped up excitedly. He pointed at Mo Qingfeng with a twisted face. You're testing medicine. You want to use their bodies to experiment. You have a rich imagination. Whether I'm testing medicine or not, I'll give you an answer in 3 days. If you don't want to find the murderer, then bring the corpses back. Mo Qingfeng's eyes were cold as she said lightly. Murderer. You're the murderer. Young Master Nalan closed the door. Mo Qingfeng walked into Qianji Hall. Her eyes were as cold as ice. She closed the door. No matter how noisy they were outside, they couldn't hear it inside Kuching building. If they wanted to make trouble, then let them. She didn't believe that they had the ability to burn down Kuching building. Wait! Suddenly, a pleasant voice came from the crowd. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice. They saw Chu Mukin, who was wearing a purple brocade robe, walking slowly from the crowd. He stopped in front of Mo Qingfeng and looked at her indifferently. His whole body exuded a noble and indifferent aura. Chapter 1527. Closing the door is not the solution. He slowly said, his tone not as cold as before. I wonder if the 8th king has a better solution. Mo Qingfeng sneered and a trace of ridicule flashed in her eyes. This king will ask the forensic doctor to do an autopsy on them and prove that they didn't die from poisoning. Even if they died from the soul-condensing pill, the pill is not poisonous. It can only be said that they were not suitable to take it. Chu Mukin frowned and lowered his voice. Will they be convinced if you say that? That's their business. I also took the soul-condensing pill, but the people of Qinglu also took it. Even Yan Xia, who has no cultivation, took it and they were fine. Why did these 10 people die? It's very simple. Someone was married to Qianji Tang and I asked them to put the body in Kuchinglu to do an autopsy. Mo Qingfeng coldly looked at Chu Mukin and a trace of disdain flashed in her beautiful eyes. Kuchinglu's people can do an autopsy and so can I. You don't need to ask the forensic doctor. You also know how to do an autopsy. Chu Mukin frowned. He didn't find it strange that Kuchinglu's people knew how to do an autopsy, but he found it strange that Mo Qingfeng knew how to do an autopsy. What didn't she know? Prescribing medicine, refining pills, killing people with poison, challenging Kuchinglu. This woman was becoming more and more mysterious, so mysterious that he was beginning to be interested in her. Mo Qingfeng sneered and her eyes were full of ridicule. She walked past Chu Mukin and a burst of fragrance came to his nose. Chu Mukin's mind shook and he stared at her in a daze. Mo Qingfeng stood at the entrance of Qianji Tang and calmly faced hundreds of people, including hundreds of family members of the deceased. Her calmness, as well as the cold temperament on her body, were enough to suppress any scene. She coldly swept her gaze over everyone present, including the 10 bodies lying on the ground, and said in a powerful voice, "If you believe me, then leave them. If you don't, then take them away." Kuching Lu's people and I also took the soul condensing pill. If there was a problem with the pill, we wouldn't be standing here facing you. As long as you leave them behind, I promise you the truth in 3 days. If she found out who used this despicable method to frame Qianji Tang, she would not let this person go. Returning the truth to them was also returning his own innocence. How do you expect us to believe you? Who doesn't know that there are many cold-faced assassins in Kuching Lu? You want to become an emperor, so you open a clinic and kill ordinary people like us. The woman who was sent flying by Mo Qingfeng said angrily. If I didn't have you commoners, why would I be called an emperor? Mo Qingfeng sneered. You can all leave them in Kuching Lu. This prince promises you that he will return them to you in 3 days. You can leave them in Kuching Lu first and go back to prepare for their funerals. Chu Muqin took 2 steps forward and looked at them with deep eyes. Chu Muqian's reputation in Chu Qian country was quite good. Everyone knew that he was deeply favored by the emperor, and all the civil and military officials in the court supported him to inherit the throne in the future. With his words, the family members of the deceased looked at each other and wavered. They also wanted to find the culprit as soon as possible. If it was Qianji Tang, they would definitely not let Mo Qingfeng off. Since the 8th prince has spoken, we will give him face. I will leave my husband in Kuching Tower and come back in 3 days. Alas, this is the only way. We can't argue here. Mo Qingfeng gave Nailanjinyu a look, and Nailanjinyu and the people of Kuching Lu came over to carry the body. After the body was carried in, Qianji Tang no longer accepted any business today. After such a thing happened, except for Yuding, no one dared to ask Mo Qingfeng for treatment. Chu Muqin slowly turned around, his thin lips slightly hooked up, outlining a perfect arc. There was a faint smile on his handsome face. Do you need this prince's help? Mo Qingfeng, who was about to go in, suddenly stopped and looked back to meet Chu Muqian's eyes. I won't be grateful to you just because of a few words. Chu Muqian's mouth still hooked up, and his gentle voice was like a gentle breeze blowing through the forest. This prince is willing to do things for you, so you don't need to be grateful. As long as she didn't hate him so much. Mo Qingfeng didn't say anything more, and walked into Qianji Tang. Chu Muqian looked at her straight back, and a complicated look flashed through his eyes. After Mo Qingfeng came in, the door of Qianji Tang closed automatically, isolating it from everyone outside. Miss Mo, who do you suspect did it? Nailanjinyu walked over and looked at Mo Qingfeng's beautiful face with deep eyes. The 10 bodies were placed in a pavilion in the backyard. Mo Qingfeng looked at Nailanjinyu deeply. Help me find out when these 10 people took the soul consolidating pill, when they died, if they saw anyone else before they died, or if anyone else went to the deceased's house. Nailanjinyu nodded. It wasn't difficult for him to find out information. I'm going to do the autopsy. Mo Qingfeng walked to the backyard. I'll go with you. Nailanjinyu followed behind her to the pavilion in the backyard. When they arrived at the pavilion, Mo Qingfeng ordered the people of Kuching Lu to take off the clothes of the 10 bodies. Mo Qingfeng, you don't want to leave. Nailanjinyu looked at Mo Qingfeng in surprise. These 10 were all men. Although they were dead, the men's bodies didn't change. Mo Qingfeng frowned. I'm doing the autopsy, why should I leave? But they're all men. Not to mention the corpses, even if they were alive men, she would be indifferent if they took off their clothes and stood in front of her. She was a modern person and was very open-minded. The corpses are also men's corpses. Nailanjinyu looked at Mo Qingfeng with a complicated gaze. She was so casual when facing men's bodies. Mo Qingfeng looked at Nailanjinyu meaningfully. shook his head, and smiled faintly. At this time, the clothes of the 10 corpses had been taken off. Of course, the important parts of the men were still covered with a small piece of cloth. The 10 deceased were all martial artists when they were alive. They all had sexy and firm muscles on their chests and looked strong. If they weren't killed with such a healthy body, they could at least live to be 100 years old. Mo Qingfeng looked at them and sighed in her heart. Did she kill them? She walked over and started with the first corpse. Her slender fingers gently pressed on the head of the deceased and carefully checked. There were no signs of injury on the surface of their bodies. She focused on the head. The best way to kill people was to start with the head. There was a kind of silver needle thinner than hair that could be inserted into the head along the hair root and take the life with one needle. Mo Qingfeng suspected that the other party took their lives with the silver needle. Now she had to find the cause. Most of the human body could be killed with one needle. The brain, heart, pulse, and a man's penis. Mo Qingfeng didn't let go of these fatal parts. She also carefully checked other parts, even the fingernails. Unfortunately, after the first corpse was examined, she didn't find any trace of injury. She took out the silver needle that she carried with her and probed into the throat of the deceased. After a quarter of an hour, the color of the silver needle didn't change. Obviously, there was no poison in their bodies. There were no traces of injury in the heart or the brain, and there was no poison in the throat. She asked the lark to bring 10 bowls, each bowl was filled with salt water. She cut the fingertips of the 10 deceased and squeezed a few drops of blood into the bowls. The blood in the bowls was very red. Mo Qingfeng frowned. There's no poison in their blood. They're all martial artists. Taking the soul concentrating pill will only improve their cultivation and skills. It won't take their lives. Who could be so good at killing people? After the first corpse was examined, Mo Qingfeng examined the second one, then the third one, the fourth one. Nailan Jinyu looked at her white hands touching the bodies and felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. After examining the 10 corpses with great difficulty, Mo Qingfeng's expression became very heavy. They didn't even have a scar on their bodies. They died about 3 hours ago. Their bodies were cold, but not stiff. If they died from poison, their bodies would gradually stiffen after 4 hours. Obviously, they didn't feel any pain when they died. They didn't know that death would come to them. They didn't have a trace of fear before they died. How is it? Is there anything wrong with them? Nailan Jinyu stepped forward and looked deeply at Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng frowned slightly, her eyes cold. I can't find anything wrong with them. Their throats are not poisoned, their blood is not poisoned, and there are no injuries on their bodies. Could it be that he was cursed by someone? Nailan Jinyu frowned, looking at Mo Qingfeng with a deep gaze. Cursed? Mo Qingfeng looked at Nailan Jinyu in confusion. Curses can make people die. Curses are a very poisonous method. A high-level curser can curse the other party to die immediately. The dead have no symptoms before they die. It's like they're in a deep sleep. Is there really a curse? Mo Qingfeng murmured. In her previous life, she always heard people joke or curse you, but it didn't work. There were all kinds of strange things in this world. No one in Chu Qian country has practiced curses yet. It's very common in Tan Chuan country. Nailan Jinyu said and then was shocked. Could it be Princess Lingyi? Mo Qingfeng's expression turned cold. She had no enmity with Lingyi. Why did that woman keep holding on to her? Because of Chu Mukin. Mo Qingfeng stared into Nailan Jinyu's eyes. If you were Lingyi, would you use curses to kill them? Wouldn't this give people the feeling that she was hiding something? Nailan Jinyu pondered for a moment and suddenly thought of Oh Chiao Tian's words. His eyes became even deeper. Could it be Oh Chiao Tian? Mo Qingfeng's expression turned cold. A trace of killing intent flashed in her eyes. If it's really him, I won't let the O family go. She turned around and coldly looked at the row of corpses. Nailan Jinyu saw that her beautiful little face was very pale and his eyes slightly darkened. He said with concern, Miss Mo, you should go back to your room and rest. As for who killed them, leave it to Ku Qinglu and me to investigate. Chapter 1528. Aha! Mo Qingfeng tilted his head and looked deeply at Nailan Jinyu before replying softly. After placing the body, Mo Qingfeng returned to Qingxin Pavilion. Fu Yanxia told her that O Yuding had woken up from his bath and was waiting for her in the wooden hut in the backyard. When she arrived at the backyard, she could smell the fragrance of flowers in the air. Mo Qingfeng loved flowers, so the front and backyards were filled with all kinds of flowers. The air would be filled with the fragrance of flowers all year round. The backyard was beautiful with endless mountains and green trees behind it. The air was fresh, and hundreds of flowers bloomed in the yard. There were fake mountains and thousands of small trees. When she walked into the wooden hut, what greeted her nose wasn't the fragrance of flowers, but the smell of herbs. In the wooden hut, O Yuding was still lying on his bamboo chair. Ah Dong and Ah Nan were by his side as usual. O Yuding closed his eyes in exhaustion. Ever since he got sick, he wasn't in good spirits and always wanted to sleep. He was afraid that once he fell asleep, he wouldn't be able to wake up again. He just closed his eyes and didn't dare to sleep. When he heard the door creak, he suddenly opened his swollen eyes. His eyes were red, but they were shining. He wanted to stand up with his swollen body, but it hurt every time he moved. He frowned and was annoyed that he couldn't even stand. Was he about to die? Miss Mo, what did you make me bathe? I feel much better. At least it wasn't itchy anymore. He saw a glimmer of hope. Mo Qingfeng's eyes were as cold as ice. She thought that if O Yuding killed those 10 people, she would take O Yuding's life first. You don't need to know what I made you. Stay in the wooden hut and recuperate. If you need anything, you can tell Yanxia. Mo Qingfeng said. It sounded like she was caring for a patient, but her tone was extremely cold. O Yuding looked at her in a daze. Would this woman die if she wasn't cold? When Mo Qingfeng walked over, O Yuding felt a strong killing intent. He was startled and looked up at her in shock. Mo Qingfeng smiled coldly. She looked at O Yuding as if she was looking at a dead man. Why are you looking at me like that? O Yuding asked in a daze. Why did he have a feeling that she would take his life at any time? O Yuding, if you die one day, remember that it was O Wantian who killed you. Eunuch Tang was shocked. Impossible. My grandfather won't kill me. Humph. Mo Qingfeng sneered and turned to look at Fu Yanxia, try to satisfy Master O's needs. Don't let him leave the cabin for even half a step. Don't open the window either. Insist on bathing him for 7 days. Fu Yanxia nodded respectfully. Yes, Yanxia will remember. Miss Mo, why can't young master take even half a step out of the wooden house? Aren't you putting us under house arrest? Ah Dong saw that Mo Qingfeng was about to leave and immediately spoke up. Mo Qingfeng turned around and looked at him coldly. Ah Dong's heart trembled when he met her cold gaze. All of you can step out of the cabin, but he can't. His cold gaze drifted to O Yangting. Why not? Ah Dong asked. Mo Qingfeng's eyes turned even colder. She couldn't be bothered with Ah Dong and strode out of the cabin. Ah, Dong didn't give up and wanted to chase after her. Suddenly, Fu Yanxia stretched out her arms and stopped him. If Miss Mo says no, it means no. Is it you or Miss Mo who knows medicine? Also, if Miss Mo doesn't want to answer, you better not ask anymore. At noon, Nailan Jinyu came back from outside and brought Imo Qingfeng news that O Wantian didn't know about the death of people who took the soul concentrating pill. The entire O residence was preparing for O Yangshuan's funeral. In the 8th Marquis residence, Princess Lingyi was with Chu Mukin all day. There was nothing suspicious. After hearing this, Mo Qingfeng's eyes turned cold and she smiled coldly. The calmer a person was, the more suspicious they were. At night, in the 8th Marquis residence, a black shadow streaked across the sky and landed silently in Ling Ye's bedroom. The bedroom was brightly lit and there was a luminous pearl on the stone dragon pillar in front of the bed, making the entire bedroom seem like it was daytime. Ling Yi was also a cultivator and she hadn't slept yet. Lying on the bed and thinking about what happened in Thousandji Hall today, she was very happy. Mo Qingfeng silently appeared in the bedroom. She didn't notice, but she suddenly smelled a fragrance that didn't belong to her. She immediately raised her guard and opened her eyes. She didn't know when a black-clothed man was standing in front of the bed. Who are you? Ling Yi was shocked and sat up suddenly. She looked at the masked Mo Qingfeng in front of her in shock. I want to take you to a place. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. His eyes were cold and his whole body was emitting a terrifying aura. What place? I don't know you. To see the person you killed. When Ling Yi heard this, a strange and guilty look flashed through her beautiful eyes. I don't know what nonsense you're talking about. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked at Mo Qingfeng in shock. You're Mo Qingfeng. Then, her sharp eyes quickly swept through the window and saw a familiar tall figure pass by. She felt proud and got off the bed. Mo Qingfeng, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never killed anyone. Who are you taking me to see? A woman who doesn't mean what she says. Mo Qingfeng looked coldly at Ling Yi who walked past her. Why are you pretending in front of me? Do you think I'll come to you if I don't have evidence? Ling Yi didn't say anything and walked behind her. Her beautiful eyes flashed and she suddenly raised her hand and patted her chest. Ah! Her whole body was on the table and the teapot and teacups on the table were instantly swept to the ground. Mo Qingfeng's eyes turned cold. He suddenly turned around and looked at Ling Yi with a trace of confusion. Her chest suddenly hurt and she tightly clenched her hands in her sleeves. Damn it, why did her body hurt at this time? At this time, the door was pushed open and Chu Mukin's handsome figure rushed in. When he saw the injured Ling Yi, his eyes turned cold and sharp like a nighthawk looked at Mo Qingfeng. Who are you? Ling Yi raised her eyes and looked pitifully at Mo Qingfeng. She said painfully, I don't know you. Why did you do this to me? Then she grabbed Chu Mukin's hand and said with a trembling voice, Brother Mukin, save me, don't let her escape. Mo Qingfeng frowned. This Ling Yi was even more despicable than Yi Qingyun. Who are you? Why did you hurt Ling Yi? Chu Mukin helped Ling Yi up and said gloomily. Hurt Ling Yi? Mo Qingfeng sneered. She didn't even make a move. How could she hurt her? At this time, her body began to hurt and her meridians felt like they were about to break. Knowing that she couldn't beat Chu Mukin, Mo Qingfeng activated her mind and wanted to enter the space. When she activated her mind, Ling also whispered something to Chu Mukin. Because she had to concentrate on activating her mind, she didn't pay attention to it. She didn't know what this bitch said to Chu Mukin. Chu Mukin's face changed greatly when he heard it. Before she had time to enter the space, Chu Mukin hit her with his palm. Bang! Mo Qingfeng wanted to dodge. Who knew that when she tried to move her body, her blood vessels felt like they were about to explode. Her meridians were even more painful. Her movements were just a little slower. Chu Mukin's fatal palm wind had already hit her chest. Her heart was already in pain. If she was hit by this palm, it would be easy to take her life. Mo Qingfeng's body suddenly flew out like a kite with a broken string. She formed a beautiful arc in the air and then landed heavily. At the same time, her veil fell, revealing a beautiful but pale face. You are. When he saw her face, Chu Mukin was shocked and his face changed. Mo Qingfeng lay on the ground. She wanted to get up, but she didn't have the strength to do so. Blood spurted out from her mouth and her face was even paler. Chu Mukin pushed Ling Yi away and walked towards her nervously. After a few steps, a man in black suddenly broke through the wall unblocked in front of Chu Mukin. Chu Mukin's footsteps suddenly stopped. The man in front of him was wearing a black brocade robe. His sleeves fluttered without any wind. He stood tall and straight in front of him. His whole body carried a demonic aura that seemed to have just come out of hell. It was extremely dark. Mo Qingfeng raised her eyes and looked at the man's familiar back. A faint smile appeared on her pale face. "Duge Zinin," Chu Mukin exclaimed. Wasn't he not in the capital? Why did he always appear at the critical moment when Mo Qingfeng was injured? Duge Zinin's deep eyes were fierce and ruthless. There was also a thick anger. His whole body was murderous. You dare to hurt this lord's woman. Only death awaits you. Duge Zinin said coldly. He fiercely attacked. His body flew into the air like a black cloud. His fierce attack pressed towards Chu Mukin. Chu Mukin quickly dodged. His body flew into the air. Before he could catch his breath, Duge Zinin attacked him again. The two fought from inside to outside. Ling also glared at Mo Qingfeng with resentment and then chased out. She really regretted hitting herself so hard just now. If it wasn't for the fact that she could help Chu Mukin now. The two figures fought fiercely in the air. When the two powerful forces collided, it was like a volcanic eruption. Earth-shattering sounds came from the air one after another, alarming everyone in the Eighth Lord's residence. Bai Shuling and Du Wenjun rushed towards Moon Garden Palace with a group of guards. You guys are so slow. Hurry up and protect Brother Mukin. Ling was also very anxious. If Brother Mukin was injured, she would be heartbroken. Du Wenjun and Bai Shuling didn't say anything. They rushed forward with the guards. Bang! Duge Zinin, who was fighting fiercely with Chu Mukin, suddenly jumped up a few feet. He shouted and opened his arms. A yellow cyclone spun out from his palms. This cyclone was like a dragon coming out of the sea. It whistled. Ah, ah! The guards who hadn't rushed up were hit by this cyclone and flew a few feet away. At this time, screams resounded through the sky. There were heavy casualties. Even Chu Mukin didn't escape from this fatal cyclone. His handsome figure fell to the ground and knelt on one knee. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face was as pale as paper. He looked up at Duge Zinin who was standing in the air. His black brocade robe fluttered in the wind. His whole body emitted a dark aura that shocked the soul. He stood high in the air like a god overlooking the whole world. Brother Mukin. Ling also rushed up and supported Chu Mukin who was on the verge of collapse. She looked very worried and nervous. Chapter 1529. This king is fine. Although Chu Mukin's face was pale, his eyes were sharp. He struggled to stand up and pushed Ling away, not letting her help him. Why would a man need a woman's help? And it was in front of Mo Qingfeng and Du Gezinen. This was a loss to his status as a king. Ling's heart also ached. She thought that Chu Mukin didn't want to be close to her and felt wronged. Mo Qingfeng clutched her chest and stumbled out. The burning pain in her meridians was unbearable. Her heart was like a fire burning crazily. It was extremely painful. Chu Mukin was ruthless. She was afraid that her heart meridian was broken by him. Du Gezinen's eyes emitted a cold light. He swept over everyone on the ground like a god. When he saw Mo Qingfeng stumbling out and holding onto a pillar to look at him, the coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away instantly faded. His figure flew towards her like an arrow. At the same time, there was a handsome figure in the air and landed in front of Mo Qingfeng with Du Gezinen. Mo Qingfeng frowned because of the pain. In the dark night, one could see that her face was as white as paper. "Miss Mo, you're injured?" Nailan Jinyu asked nervously. He took 2 steps forward to help her, but he felt a cold gaze on him. He turned back to look at Du Gezinen. His heart shook and he took a few steps back. Du Gezinen went forward and picked her up. His dark eyes looked coldly at Chu Mukin. "Didn't you go back to Duge Castle? Didn't they say that it took 3 months for iron blood bats to fly back and forth? Don't speak. There's a strange energy in your body that you can't bear. The more you speak, the more painful it is." Du Gezinen held her wrist. Her pulse was abnormal, her body temperature was high, and her meridians were expanding and contracting. When he held her, he felt that something was wrong with her. Mo Qingfeng was startled. He knew at a glance that there was a strange energy in her body. "You bunch of good-for-nothings, why aren't you catching them?" Seeing Chu Mukin's deep eyes looking at Mo Qingfeng and Mo Qingfeng being held in Du Gezinen's arms, Ling was jealous. These days, when she was with Chu Mukin, she felt that he was not as gentle to her as before. Since they met, although they were separated by 2 countries, they never stopped writing to each other. He said that she would be his princess consort, but who knew that this time, his princess consort would be Mo Qingfeng. No woman could bear that the man she loved had another woman in his heart. Ling was also the princess of Tanchuan country. She was spoiled, willful, and possessive. She had always loved Chu Mukin. How could she bear that he had another woman in his heart? As she shouted, Mo Qingfeng looked at Chu Mukin. He was also looking at her. His eyes flashed with guilt and regret. If he knew it was her, how could he have dealt such a heavy blow? If he knew it was her, he wouldn't have made a move. When he saw her spurt out blood, it was as if his heart was bleeding. In that instant, he was shocked to find that he had long recognized her as his princess, and no other woman could replace her position. "Young Master Nailan, I want him dead." Mo Qingfeng's pale face turned cold. When Chu Mukin heard this, his heart sank. She actually wanted him to die. At this moment, Nailan Jinyu had already attacked him. His palm instantly condensed a surge of inner qi, blocking Nailan Jinyu's deadly murderous aura before it could strike. Failing one move, another move. Nailan Jinyu was an assassin and had never been merciless when killing people. Just now, he was injured by Du Gezinen. Now, he had to deal with Nailan Jinyu, who was also a master. Chu Mukin was a little powerless. The guards of the 8th Prince's palace were either injured or dead. Even Bai Shuling and Du Wenjun were seriously injured and unconscious. Ling's 7 flowers were also killed by Mo Qingfeng at the top of the mountain. At this time, if they wanted to take Chu Mukin's life, it would be a piece of cake. Chu Mukin fell to the ground again. His heart was in pain and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Ling also felt distressed. She rushed up and opened her arms to protect Chu Mukin. She shouted at Nalan Jinyu, who was standing coldly in front of her, "This princess won't allow you to kill him." Then she looked at Mo Qingfeng fiercely. "Mo Qingfeng, if you dare to hurt him, the emperor of Chu Qian country and this princess's father will not let you go. He is the 8th prince. You have no right to kill him." Mo Qingfeng's eyes were as cold as a 1,000-year-old river. "In my eyes, he is a man who deserves to die." When she wanted to kill someone, she never looked at the other party's identity. If she wanted to kill, she would kill. There was no room for discussion. When Chu Mukin heard this, his heart, which was hidden under his chest, instantly fell into a bottomless abyss. His deep eyes quickly flashed with a touch of sadness, and his heart was extremely bitter. In her eyes, was he a man who deserved to die? In this princess's eyes, you are a woman who deserves to die. Ling also vowed to protect Chu Mukin. She would never let Mo Qingfeng kill the man she loved. She wanted to be Chu Mukin's princess consort. In the future, she would also become Chu Qian country's empress. "Ling Yi!" Chu Mukin shouted in a low voice. Ling Ye's words made him very unhappy. He looked at Mo Qingfeng with a complicated gaze. At this time, he was seriously injured. If Nalan Jinyu wanted to kill him, he would not be able to resist. Not to mention, there was still Du Nan. Ling Yi gritted her teeth and looked at Mo Qingfeng with hatred. If it wasn't for the 2 powerful men by her side protecting her, today would be the day she died. "Feng he will die, but you will not kill him." Du Nan's face was gloomy as he looked at Chu Mukin coldly. Mo Qingfeng raised her eyes and looked at him in confusion. "If I don't kill him, will you kill him?" Du Nan lowered his eyes and stared deeply at her pale little face. "If you kill him tonight, Chu Qiangua and Tanchuan country's emperors will not forgive you. I don't want your peace to be affected because of his life." It was peace, not safety. In other words, as long as he was here, no one could take her life. It was just that it would be difficult for her to live a peaceful life. After all, Chu Mukin was the prince that Chu Qiangua's emperor valued the most. He was also the man that Princess Ling Yi loved deeply. If Mo Qingfeng killed him, the emperors of the 2 countries would not let her go. He did not want her to live a peaceful life. If her life was not peaceful, then his life would not be peaceful. It was not worth it to be disturbed by the people in the palace. Chu Mukin was going to die, but not tonight. Mo Qingfeng did not need to kill him. "But I can't wait for him to die immediately," Mo Qingfeng said coldly. She hated Chu Mukin. Du Nan stared at her deeply. His face was pale, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. His heart ached, and a trace of pity flashed through his eyes. After this pity flashed by, it was replaced by a smile. She hated Chu Muqin so much, and he was overjoyed. Killing him now will only make him happy. Feng can't help but be more patient. Let's see how he will live in pain in the future, Du Nan said. Mo Qingfeng frowned. "Live in pain?" "Yes." Du Nan smiled and said, "Believe in this sovereign." His smile was very beautiful, and the surroundings seemed to be brighter. Mo Qingfeng's heart swayed. Smelling the elegant body fragrance that belonged to him, her murderous eyes gradually became gentle. She did not know why, but she trusted Du Nan very much. Nalan Jinyu, who was watching from the side, had deep eyes. He could see that Mo Qingfeng, who had always been indifferent, was very different to Du Nan. Mo Qingfeng turned her head and looked at Chu Mukin. Her voice was extremely cold. "Today I will spare your life." Then she coldly looked at Ling Yi. "You will definitely pay the price for your actions." Du Nan carried her and flew away. His black brocade robe drew a beautiful arc in the air, and the faint fragrance of his body floated in the air. Nalan Jinyu coldly looked at Chu Mukin, then flew behind Duga Nan and returned to clear room together. Chu Mukin stood there motionless like a mountain, looking in that direction. As their figures disappeared, he thought of Mo Qingfeng's gentle gaze towards Duga Nan. His heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Returning to Clear Heart Pavilion, Mo Qingfeng was lying motionless on the bed. Chu Mukin's palm had seriously injured her heart meridian. Duga Nan was afraid that she would hurt other things, so he made her lie motionless on the bed. Her heart and meridian were extremely painful, but Mo Qingfeng did not want to move. Lying on the bed, Mo Qingfeng's eyes were cold. Her pale face seemed to be covered with a thin layer of ice. One day, she would make herself strong. She would live a better and more exciting life in Rosen Continent. Anyone who wanted to harm her, she would pay them back double. When she becomes strong, the first thing she would do is take Chu Mukin's life. Fu Yanxia came in with a bowl of medicine. Seeing Mo Qingfeng's pale face, she couldn't help but feel distressed. Miss Mo, Yanxia will feed you medicine. Fu Yanxia knelt in front of the bed and looked at her with distress. The Miss Mo she knew was elegant, but now she was lying motionless on the bed. She couldn't describe the feeling in her heart. What medicine? Her heart meridian was injured by Chu Mukin's palm, and there was a strange aura in her body. How could a bowl of medicine cure her? This is the medicine that Master Duga caught. He had Yanxia brew it for you. Where is he? He soaked the 10 corpses in water and waited for the results with Master Nalan. Mo Qingfeng was startled. Soaked the corpses in water. Fu Yanxia nodded. Master Duga said that he would come later to treat your injuries. Miss Mo, finish the medicine first. After drinking the medicine, Fu Yanxia left. Mo Qingfeng closed her eyes to recover, but she couldn't sleep. Her body gradually became hot and uncomfortable. How do you feel? Suddenly, a pleasant voice came to her ear. Mo Qingfeng opened her eyes. Duga Zenan was already standing in front of the bed, looking at her with a smile in his eyes. He was still wearing the black brocade robe. Mo Qingfeng found that no matter what color it was, it suited him. The red brocade robe made him look as noble and cold as a god. The white brocade robe made him look noble and untainted. The purple brocade robe made him look even more noble and devilish. My whole body is hot. Mo Qingfeng said faintly, and it's burning. She thought for a moment and asked, why did you soak the corpses in water? Duga Zenan smiled, I'll treat you first. After that, I'll tell you the truth. Mo Qingfeng's eyes lit up. You found out the truth. Did he have to be so powerful? He made it seem like he was omnipotent and knew everything. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.